Good evening and welcome to the City Council of the City of Escalon, regular meeting of July 15th, 2019. Would you please join me in the salute to our flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Merkin.
Here.
Councilmember Kremick.
Here.
Councilmember Legero. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Alves. Here. And Mayor Swift.
Here. Okay, I understand we have a couple of presentations tonight. One is on the agenda and one is not on the agenda. So I'm going to ask you to, Tammy, what is your pleasure? Which one would you like to go with first?
We're going to go with the one that wasn't on the agenda in error by staff. It's the swearing in of a new reserve officer, and we will let Chief handle this one.
All right, Chief, take it away.
Mayor, Council, it's my pleasure tonight to, and I'm going to use the term formal swearing in of our newest Level 1 Reserve Officer, Amanda Keyes. The reason I use that term is that while I've been out, on July 3rd, the city manager assisted me in swearing in Amanda so that we could immediately put her to use, and she was out at Park Feed and got to experience Park Feed and work for us, so she's already been out there. Amanda comes to us, she resides in the city of Galt, where she was basically raised, and she graduated from Galt High School. She's attended Cosumnes River College and CSU SAC, where she has a bachelor's degree in English, so I anticipate her reports will be really well written. She graduated from the San Joaquin Delta College Police Academy in 2015, and she's also graduated from the Teacher College of San Joaquin. She's currently employed as a special education teacher in 2 different districts up in Galt. And she's also holds an EMT certificate, so we've got a real good catch. She's here tonight with many family and friends. Her parents, Dave and Suki Keyes, are here, and her brother, David, if I'm correct. And I'm sorry, I did not catch your niece's name. Sophia. I should have. I got a granddaughter. And so, her mother will be doing her badge pinning. It's kind of interesting. I had to take it back from her. She already had it. But before we get to that, we will do a formal oath ceremony in front of everybody here. So. I state your name.
I, Amanda Keyes,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will and
well
and faithfully discharge
the
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Dave, congratulations.
It's smudged.
Well, Amanda, this is your, have anything you'd like to say and introduce your fan club back there?
Thank you again, Chief, for this opportunity, and thank you, all the members And my family and just my family, well, they're friends, but I consider them family. I'm truly blessed to have such a great support system, and the Lord's truly blessed me with this opportunity, and I intend to take advantage of it. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anything, Russell?
No, this is
Okay.
actually for Park Feet.
Okay,
Sorry,
great.
it wasn't on the agenda, so.
That's fine.
But I have no problem getting one to you.
I just want to make sure before I.
Thank you, yeah.
I mentioned to Amanda that her and her family can now celebrate, and they don't have to stay here.
But they can if they want to.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And Chief, I want to make sure I get this right. Reserve Officer Kais?
Kai.
Kais, okay. Perfect. Fantastic. And Tammy, you have a second
Actually,
presentation.
Dominique
This is
will.
to Dominique.
Yes.
Okay.
This is a developer presentation from Larry Grassi. As you recall, the Escalon Lumberyard was recently sold. So he is here just to let the council know, because I know it's come up over the last few months, what exactly will be happening with the lumberyard. So he's here to just give a summary of what his intentions are with that business and answer any questions.
Sounds good.
Good evening.
How you doing?
My name is Larry Grassi. As Dominique has mentioned, we've purchased, me and my wife, Shannon, have purchased the Escalon Lumberyard and are in the process of cleaning it up here in the last two and a half weeks. We've been really going to town on it, and with the help of family members and stuff. But I'm here to answer any questions. We're in the preliminary stages right now of, we just met with some people, met with our engineer this morning, reviewing some stuff, putting together some plans to present to the city on what our overall plan of the property is, and just here to answer any questions that you guys might have.
What do you want to see? What, if you could give a thumbnail sketch as to what you're looking at doing there and what the goal is, how would it be? What's a thumbnail sketch of?
Is preserve something that we have here in Escalon that's
Right.
been here a long time. We want to preserve the office, obviously redo the outside, and hopefully divide it up into 2 or 3 office spaces, depending on what the tenants, are wanting. And then about 8 years ago, my brother had built a 5,000 square foot shop area for the Schmitz. And hopefully our intent there is to divide that up into leasable spaces and eventually build at least, hopefully 2 to 3 more of those leasable spaces, again, depending on what the tenant is requiring. And hopefully we would start off at 1,000 square foot shops, and if they need a 2,000, we can acquire
It's like a business park of sorts?
like a business park, correct?
We need that.
So-
We need that around here badly, yeah.
And for the time being, we're still going to continue, Randy is still going to continue running the mill and still putting out the great things that he does, and something that the community, I think, really needs to really know what he can really do there. And a lot of people do, but we need to keep that here too.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yep, you're right.
So,
I was pretty excited to hear you and your involvement in this, and you were taking it over, and I saw your brother the other night.
yeah, that's what he had said, yeah.
He talked about, keeping that, that tradition there,
Yeah,
building, and I thought that was just perfect.
yeah.
So, rather than having somebody come from out of town and just wipe
Area there for the storage of some of the stuff that's in some of the other buildings to allow us to do other things on the other property, so.
Yeah, yeah. Not really a lumber. It sounds like I almost want to characterize it like as a small business park. type
Yeah, they're
thing
not
for-
gonna be a lumberyard.
Yeah, for local businesses. Yeah, but you're still gonna have that tie-in to the past, which I think is really valuable around here. But also, by you're making that opportunity for small businesses to come in, and I'll tell you what, I can give you names right now if you need names, you know. The one thing that I know I personally really appreciate is just the simple fact, buying the property, and you're not gonna use the entire property for storage for your own stuff. With all due respect, you can do, if you buy a property, you can do whatever you want with it. But, you know, it drives me nuts. I can't refer people to, you know, I'm sure you guys all get asked too, hey, do you know of any place I can rent in town? You know, I have a small business, and, well, this guy's using it to store his stuff, and that guy's using it to store his own stuff, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
We came to the Planning Commission meeting last month, and there was a question asked if we were going to use that property for our business that we have in Houston, which is, we manufacture almond and walnut processing equipment. We have no intent to do any type of storage, any type of manufacturing, any of that here in Escalon. Not that we wouldn't like to, but we're already set up there. We've got 45,000 square foot facility there, and we want to just keep this as the way it is and try to,
Sure.
like you said, build a business park that can help some of the small businesses stay here local.
Okay.
And,
Actually, a quick question, if you don't mind if I refer this to Dominique. Now, that is zoned what?
C2, which is retail commercial.
Retail commercial, okay. So, I mean, are there, you know, like I say, not every business is gonna have a storefront out of the place, you know? I mean, some of them might use it for, like what you're talking about, you know, your manufacturing, stuff like that. So how would anything like that, and I know this is complete hypothetical right now, how would that play out?
Well, if you recall, about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we made some changes to the municipal code allowing for other types of business that were not allowed in the C2 to at least have the opportunity to apply and go through the process of obtaining a conditional use permit. So as long as it is in that use of retail sales, maybe automotive, light or heavy, depending on it. The location is what's good because it's not located in residential area per se. We would be able to at least be able to have most applicants that are interested in renting that space if they have a use has some type of restriction to at least be able to get them through
Yeah,
the ability of a use permit.
right.
So the only thing at that time that wouldn't be allowed is heavy industrial use.
But the trucks aren't gonna be able to.
Yeah,
streets aren't-
that's the only
they're
stuff that
the
would
trucks
be,
anyway, so,
you
yeah.
know, yeah.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
it's supposed to be for retail sales,
Sure.
commercial business, because it's in our downtown,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think you're gonna fill it up. Really do. So, any other questions?
I would say congratulations. I'm excited about seeing what you guys do in there. It's a little bittersweet talking about the history of it. I remember when I was a kid, I might have been 8 years old, and me and a friend snuck up into one of those big bag storage units, and we were climbing around, and Marvin caught us and chased us away. And I'm still traumatized, man. I know. Anyway, sorry, Randy. And but I'm excited, you know, again to see what you guys can all do there. So congratulations.
I appreciate it, thank you. Yeah, if you guys are in the area, pass by and take a look and see what we've done so far. I mean, we've really put a lot of effort in the last, like I said, 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
gotten a lot done there, so.
Fantastic. Great.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I appreciate it very much, thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar, these items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by single action unless requested by an individual council member or member of the public for special consideration. And I would like to be able to mention regarding item number 2, I will be abstaining from voting on check number 9650. And if there are no issues with any of the remainder,
Move to approve.
Second.
motion's been approved to accept the consent calendar as written and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes 5-0. Staff communications.
Mayor and council, before you tonight are the treasurer's report, water department, development services, building report, public works, and the wastewater treatment plant for June. And staff is available to answer any questions on those.
Anything, any questions off the top of your head regarding these reports? Tammy, what else do you have? You usually have a few other.
Yep. Well, actually, the next item that I have is on the agenda, so I don't know if any chief has something else for you guys.
Just some updates, just to keep you abreast of some personnel changes within the organization. You saw one of them tonight. In light of the approval of the budget, Officer Nathan Vieira, who was one of our reserves op, has changed his status full-time effective today. Today was his first day as a full-time with his FTO, so we've completed the hiring of that July position.
Fantastic.
We'll be establishing a list here in the next few weeks we have a pending retirement in September of Officer Armandaris, and then January hire, so we'll have a list established to immediately, and that'll be from our level 1 reserves. We have probably about 6 of them that we will be testing. And we had 2 of our reserves resign for personal reasons, one health, the other one work-related. Officer Connor and Lopez both recently resigned as of the 6th of July. So lost 2, gained some. It's a never-ending. 4th of July, between the 3rd and the 5th, we probably had 10 calls related to fireworks that actually came in. One citation at least issued for Officer Portinga observed some illegal fireworks and was able to actually track down the person responsible and caught him with the mortar tube in their hand. So they received a citation and
That's not cheap, is it?
dealing with that in the course because it's felony.
They're not cheap.
Yeah. And on Park Fit, it was actually a enjoyable weekend for us. Nothing really out of control. We had a DUI traffic collision that took place at 3rd and 120 at about midnight. Other than that, that was probably the only incident on Friday. Our cornhole tournament went over well. We were a little bit down in teams, but we learned that some of the people who normally play in that tournament were all at a bachelor party, so.
Out of town.
So they were all out of town, so, but overall, it was, and the winners of the tournament this year were from out of town. They're kids I know in series that, when we started this, they decided to come play. They've been in the tournament for the last 4 years. They finally won it this year. They've been knocked out the first 3 years, so.
I'd like to vote that they don't return back to the cornhole.
They knocked him out first
Yeah.
round.
Bringing out-of-town ringers, huh?
No, hey, they paid their dues. On the 13th, we had a couple incidents where we had to advise a couple people not to return because they were a little bit intoxicated already, but no major incidents. And then one with a domestic violence incident that didn't actually take place, but they ended up inside the venue, and that was dealt with, but overall fairly. Now, the rest of the community, the rest of the night, they were busy with domestics and mental, it was a busy Saturday night for them, but the venue was nice and,
As long as it's not our fault.
nope.
That's the important part. So, okay, thank you very much. Anything else at this time?
I just wanted to give an update regarding code enforcement. Our staff has been working diligently on a few cases in town. We are constantly working with residents on, getting those notices out and working with them on addressing those issues voluntarily, being flexible with them, giving them the time they need in certain circumstances to be able to extend and provide them the time they need to get things situated and remove things that are piling up and those type of things. We would encourage, if anybody has complaints regarding stuff in their neighborhood, we do have an online system on our website, and you can do it online if you don't want to come in and fill out the form, or if you're unable to call in. So I just wanted to remind you of that, and so we are working on those code enforcement items. Feel free to call in and check status if you need to on some of the ones that we're working on. But we do provide flexibility and are working with people. So if you see that it's taken a little bit longer than usual to work with, it's because we're trying to work with them. So,
Just
Very good.
recently, I've been around town looking at some of our projects, and I'll tell you, it's unfortunate people can do stuff and not consider the impact on their neighbors, because some of these things are pretty horrendous. I mean,
There's a
they
couple
are,
I'm thinking
there are
about right
some
now.
really nasty stuff out there. And I'm glad that we're starting to crack down on it, because it's just not right that, you do that to your neighborhood.
Right.
Pretty nasty stuff.
I agree. Okay, anything else before we move on to item 8? No? Well, let's move on to item number 8, which is consideration of authorizing the city manager to enter into a long-term agricultural lease agreement with Tilbury Farms Incorporated. Tammy?
Yes, so Mayor and Council, before you tonight, I've provided a couple of options that Tilbury Farms Incorporated has proposed. We did enter into a short-term agricultural lease for the city's future parkland that has approximately 18 acres of almonds. It's actually a 19-acre piece, but there's only about 18 acres of almonds located there on Escalon Balota in November of 2018. At a recent city council meeting, staff was requested to inquire with Tilbury Farms Incorporated regarding the potential of a long-term lease. And based on my discussions with Mr. Tilbury, the potential terms of those of the lease are there are two sets of them, option A and option B. So the first option is that Tilbury will actually replant the existing trees, take care of all aspects of preparing the land and installing the new trees.
He's gonna replant the existing trees?
Well, he's going to replant new trees.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure what
yeah.
we're doing there.
Yeah, so we're replanting with new trees. My apologies. He's estimating that those costs are about $5,000 per acre. And with that, he would cover the cost. There would be no payments to the city for the first 6 years of the new trees. On the 7th year, payments would be at 20% of the crop proceeds. He is offering early buyout options for years 1 through 11, which would be 5 times the expense of the trees and irrigation. And then that amount would be predetermined with receipts and documents. So once he's done planting the new orchard, that amount would be established. The early buyout option for years 12 through 15 would be 4 times those expenditures. And it would be a 20-year lease with an additional 5-year option. The second option is that the city actually pays for the purchase of the trees and preparing of the land for the orchard up front. The farmer would still do all of the prep work and plant all the trees and purchase of the trees. We would just be responsible for those actual costs. So years 1 through 10, the city would be paid 10% of the crop proceeds, which we're not really estimated to get a first-year crop until year 3. Years 11 and to the end of the lease, of the 20-year lease, the city would be paid 20% of crop proceeds. There would be early buyout options for year 1 through 10 at $150,000, and then 11 through 20 at the $100,000. Both options include the laser leveling for the orchard and the allocation for a parking area next to the existing park. And the city would be responsible for installation of fencing to separate the orchard from the parking area. Staff did some estimate of revenues for each of the options using prior year crop weights. So the revenues could be fairly low, but both options were done with the same estimates. And option A, our estimated revenue for 20 years would be approximately $150,000, and your buyout option is either at $450,000 or $360,000. Option B, which is where the city pays for those the tree replacement up front, would be approximately $145,000. And if you took out what our upfront cost of the $90,000, the estimated $90,000 for the new trees and labor, it would be a net of $55,473. And then our buyout would be at $150,000 or $100,000. So In addition to the long-term lease, staff has also been asked to look into the potential of putting a jog path around the orchard. And I did inquire with Tilbury Farms. Unfortunately, they were not open to the jog path, primarily due to exposure for vandalism. They feel like they've kind of already taken that with the parking, which is why they've asked for the fencing. The other side of it is the chemicals that they use on the orchard and the exposure for liability from some of those items. So if the city wanted to continue with the installation of the jog path, we would have to find another farmer for the orchard. Or we could consider a different location, and my thoughts were Main Street Park. So therefore, staff's asking council to authorize me to enter into a long-term lease with their recommended option or any other, action that the council would like me to do.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. Yeah, I'd like to slow this whole thing way down a little bit, and this is something I feel really strongly about, that we're not utilizing that land the way we should. I mean, if you look at what we're going to make over 20 years, over a 20-year period, that's an entire, generation of people, and we're going to make $150,000 on this land. We have this grand scheme of having a $20 million, regional park put in, and I'd just like to make a few points. I don't see us ever having a funding mechanism to do that outside of a massive bond or something, which, it's very unlikely. And this is, to my knowledge, the largest piece of land probably that the city owns outside of the wastewater treatment plant. Am I right? Maybe even bigger than that. But either way,
Yeah,
it's one
not
of the
bigger than
biggest,
the treatment plant,
it's
but
one of the
yeah.
biggest, real estate assets that the city has. And therefore, I think we owe it to the people of Escalon to put some input into this. And so I think that's important. I also think that we can find the best of both worlds on this project. I know that the walking, jogging path is one of those city amenities that a lot of people like, whether you're handicapped and you just want to roll around someplace. I mean, think about Escalon, where you run around. You run around the street. Maybe you go to the high school. The high school track's often closed. You can't get in there during school. I think it would be a great balance because, like I said, I've got opinions on what to do with the land, but to me, this seems like something we need to pursue, and we should not sign a 20-year lease at this time until we figure out a compromise here. And so that's kind of my take on it. I have invited a few people. I've reached out to the community to see if anybody has any input on this, and I've invited them, and if the mayor will allow, I think we can have them speak.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody wants to speak on this issue, you can come on up. Is that allowed? Wait.
Well, I mean, the mayor should do
Oh, I didn't mean
that,
to-
unless you want, if you want to let the council ask questions first, then you can open it
Well,
up
let
for
me do
public
that. No,
comment.
yeah, that's a good idea, Tammy, just to season the debate, because this is a big issue. And, of course, we've been grappling it for a long time, and actually, the roots of this issue, really, from what we're talking about now, stem back almost 20 years to the Bob Cabral Park concept, really. So, do any of you have any opening thoughts? Before we get some thoughts from the audience on this one.
Where are we at right now? What's the current status of that property, lease-wise, term-wise?
So we entered into a 3-year short-term lease in November of 2018.
And what are the terms of that lease?
Well, basically, it's a 3-year lease. That's all the farmer was willing to do with the existing trees. If we want to go beyond that, then we would have to enter into some kind of long-term lease with him.
So there's no pressure from the farmer at this point to do a long-term lease, that's a request from the city?
No, the long-term lease really came out of when we were talking to the farmer about putting in the parking lot. There was some concerns there about the conditions of the land and the level of the land, and that it was made mention that if we were to do a new trees, the whole land would get laser leveled, which would give you a better option for the parking.
And this is just kind of set the table here so that people that haven't been involved
Sure.
in this issue, they kind of know where we're at currently with this. So along with that discussion, this long-term lease issue came up, and then there were discussions with Tilbury Farms about the long-term lease that led to these terms that were negotiated, I guess.
Correct. They were proposed by the farmer.
Has there been any kind of counter to these, other than?
Not
the
at this
walk-
time.
walk path?
Okay. Let's go and have some thoughts from the audience on this one.
Good evening. I'm Rick Heflin, for those of you that don't know me. I just came tonight, I got to hear a lot about this. If you haven't noticed, I run everywhere around this town and walk with my wife and everything and send a lot of kids out. And when we were talking in Kiwanis about something we could do to help the town, I mean, not expecting the city to come up with a jogging path, we want to do some ground roots thing. And I don't know if the problems can be solved, but I wanted the opportunity, and that's why I came tonight, to see if there is some leeway to find out how many people would like this. Because we're not just talking kids. I mean, the elderly people, you know, which hopefully I'm gonna be sooner or later here, need, you know, they don't have to deal with cars. They can have a safe place. I mean, if it's a fence along the path on one side, a half fence, then if anybody crosses the fence, you're talking about trespassing, and that can be dealt with the police. If it's open, I see the farmer's problem a little bit. But I want to have an opportunity to maybe see what this town wants to do, because it would be something that would be, you know, most of the sidewalks are hard to walk on because of the trees that are beautiful, but they're hard to walk on. And it would be nice to have, you know, an area for that, to be safe for kids to learn to ride bikes, people to walk and everything. And it just seemed like a really good use. Do it on the outside of the orchard, then you still could get your revenue from the orchard, but you would have this path, and we would have an opportunity for the community. So I came tonight just to kind of throw that out. I mean, it sounds like, you know, we haven't even countered yet, so maybe that's a good thing, and we do have some time, because I'm hoping in negotiations, you know, we do some countering and do some, you know, talking to maybe even other farmers and see what they want to do. Because, you know, I don't want to not have this farmer get this property, but in the same token, I don't want the town, because if we go into a lease and that's it, then that land's not going to be used for anything. Not a first, because I know there's other ideas out there, like a first phase of putting some soccer fields out there, just some grass, so kids can play. So there's some other things at play, and I know that's out there. So if we go 20 years right now at those terms, then we're saying to the community, we're done with its property for a generation. So that's all I really wanted to say tonight, just to throw that out there to give everybody something to think about. I can't say for sure that I can pull this off, or I can get a lot of people. I know there are some people behind it. I'd like the opportunity to maybe get some more. Maybe it doesn't work, or maybe, you know, because one thing I did hear tonight, and I don't know anything about farming, but the chemicals. That may be a concern we can't overcome. Maybe a concern we can overcome, and it's a little overstated, because I know they spray chemicals everywhere. I mean, every orchard around here that we run through by the school, I mean, so maybe that's a little overstated, I don't know. But thank you for listening. Any questions for me?
So you envision this as a project by the Kiwanis Club to pay for and install the?
I envision this, I hope the city would throw in, but I envision this, you know, we were looking at, because we had like, and 20,000 isn't much, and I realize it's going to take a lot more than that. But I was hoping, we'd talked to the Lions, we've talked to the Rotary. There's some very, you know, influential people out here that walk all around town, because I talk to them every day, that might be involved in this too. I think this is something the community gets behind, because if the community builds it, the community's going to take care of it. So I don't see it, me just coming here and saying, hey, city, do this. I see me getting to work and seeing if there's some people involved. We may draw out a plan and come up short, and then, you know, I realize that's a possibility. But I also see that it's something the community can help for the community.
I was going to speak regarding the chemicals. I know that with most, and I forget what the distance is, but growers, they cannot spray most classes of chemicals within, oh gosh, the distance keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger between you. They cannot spray within X amount of feet from a school site. So in other words, you know, and often if they're buttressing up against the school site, legally they're not supposed to be spraying, let's say, like the last 2-3 rows, or something like that. I don't know how this would come into play, you know, a walking path with that, but I do know that there's established law that there's that buffer that they're supposed to be adhering to already.
I'll throw something out right here. In a path like this, you would have a time it's open and a time it's closed. Can you spray at night? What's the time frame?
Yeah.
Can it, if it's 12 hours from spray, can now you open it up again? You know, there are, I'm not, like I said, all I'm asking for is to pursue some of the solutions.
So, Mr. Heflin, thanks for coming tonight. And you see this as kind of a grassroots community project that would benefit almost every age group, right? From little kids all the way up to senior citizens. And if we have this opportunity, tying it up for 20 years, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah. Or like I said, if the council decides to go another way with the land and do a phase one, tying it for 20 years also doesn't make sense. All I'm saying is if we're in the beginning stages, let all sides bring the plans forth. I mean, give me a deadline, I'll go for it. So, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Hef.
Angelo Blanco, 1604 Fifth Street. We had a organization come here, or some company, they made these big plans for the park. I think we spent $20,000 on it. Money down the tube. There's just no incentive for you guys to get it going. Now you want to tie it up for 25 years. We're not in the farming business. No, we can do this. I think it's 15 or 17 acres if we have to. We could subdivide half of it, sell it, and develop the other half. But don't tie it up for 20-something years. And he had a good idea. Maybe the public might help us. Maybe we have a meeting, if anybody in the public wants to come help at the park, tell them we're in the process of renting it out for 25 years, and I don't think people would like that. We already got $20,000 invested in it, and we're not even going to use it. We're going to plant almonds. We're not almond farmers. That's supposed to be for the community. 20 years from now, I wonder if half you guys are going to be here. I know I won't be here. We ought to come up with something better than that. It's been kicking around for the last 3 years. Seems like there's just no incentive here from the city itself to get it going, so I think the community will get it going if you guys let us. Give them a chance. If people would volunteer to do it, and I think you'd get a lot of help. That's all I got to say about it. But they're tied up for the next 3 years, I think you said, from 2017 and what, 2020 or what?
2016 or 2018 is when we entered into the lease.
2008, 2009?
2018, so till 2021, we're in a current lease.
Okay, we got to do something between now and 2021. Thank you.
And, yeah, just let me get them first. And then,
Danny Fox, 1510 Adriana, Escalon. I'm not going to ramble. We're talking about this park out here at 20 acres and how we're going to do it and where's it going to be funded. We're just on the heels of Park Feet. And how did the people in 1922 get to the park that we have on Main Street? It was through advertisement, it was through donations, it was through the community efforts, and they got it done. They had a plan, they set out some goals to do it, and it was achieved. And I think that's the very same thing what we're talking about. They had the park there, wasn't even theirs. on Main Street, but they developed it. I think if it's advertised, if it's done properly, it could be done incrementally in stages. The walk path, I think at one time we were talking about 2 rows of trees for a parking lot, to rip those out. Well, perhaps 2 rows of trees all the way around the border of the property would offset that for the walk or jogging path and allow him to put some kind of fence or that distance between where he sprays. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience at this moment? No problem.
Dave Bellinger, 1420 Winterbrook. What, on a 3-year lease that we currently have, what's the revenue that we're generating on that estimated on an annual basis?
It's, oh, wait. So I haven't gotten the crop from 2018 yet, from the previous farmer. But the year prior to that, for 2017 crop it's 9,000 for the crop, plus we get money for the house that's on the property, which is 15,000 a year.
So that's the current revenue on the 3-year lease, give or take, that's the estimated revenue.
Correct,
And
24,000.
That's with old trees, with that 3-year
Correct.
lease.
Mhm.
So we level it, whether we pay it or somebody else pays it, we put 20 acres of nuts in, and we're gonna make 150 grand over the course of 20 years, or is that 150 a year?
That's over the course of 20 years, and that's
So
a
we're
really
going
low
backwards.
yeah.
That's a backwards financial move.
Well, that's the
long-term lease to
revenues,
tie up
and there's
property
still
to-
property tax that we pay. So really, we're netting about 14,000 a year,
By not paying the property taxes.
because
on
we're
the 20-year
paying the
loan.
property taxes, yes.
So we're netting now, how much, you said?
About 14,000.
And going forward, we're gonna net how much?
It depends upon the years, but it's anywhere from 15, well, no, that's not true, because that's,
20 to 150 is 7,500 bucks a year. Farmer needs to go back to and do some better math, if we're gonna do
well,
that
that's
deal.
basically on the crop, not including, the 150 is just for the crop, not including the house rental.
Right, they expected better revenues with better trees, I would imagine.
Well, I would say that too, but I don't have a good history to go by, and I'm not a
Yeah.
farmer to be able
No, I know that.
to
I'm
project
just
that
saying.
out. So again,
That first number for the city, if you actually decide to go that way.
as I said in, when I was doing my staff report, I mean, these are based on history, not knowing what a regular crop could be, because we've always had older trees on this property.
Yeah, I would expect better production out of new ones, so.
Yeah.
No, you're right,
Yeah,
no.
think about those numbers, don't go with that deal.
Well, I think those numbers, he's talking about 20%, but I think David's right. No, your actual crop numbers, you're talking about a young orchard, especially coming in at prime, you're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, which is why the buyout is higher in those early years. I mean, you should be getting well more than, 2,000, 25,000, 2,500 pounds per acre off something like that. So, anybody else like to speak first before we throw it back to council? Randy?
Randy Schmidt, 1411 Dent Street. Just as a reference, we have 20 acres that we just did that same thing with, and that's a pretty standard arrangement, sounds like. I mean, as far as the arrangement, I think we get, it's a 25-year lease is the only way they would do it. They wouldn't do less because he had to put in all the trees and irrigation. And so 25 years was a minimum. We get $5,000 a year those first years. That's the only difference in ours. But we only get 17% after. And we did that because Dad's 91. And so we wanted more money up front than later. So, but it sounds like it's, I mean, as far as that agreement, it sounds like it's a pretty standard. That was a Blue Diamond agreement that was ours and with our farmer. And so anyway, as far as numbers, that's pretty much standard.
Thank you.
You know, this is a frustrating one because, we've wrestled over this. I know Danny and I last fall, we wrestled over this an awful lot too. And I see it as a two-pronged issue. You have an aging orchard that's essentially aged out, yet, he has a short-term lease on it. And so, it's not getting any younger. So what are you looking at realistically with this particular orchard, which within 3 years, you probably won't have anybody wanting to lease it, so then we'll need to come up with a decision. Do we take the trees out? Who do we have taking care of the ground? Who do we have taking care of the orchard? And don't get me wrong, I love that trail idea. I think that's a fantastic idea. But, you keep wrestling with this, and you keep thinking, here's what's going to look like in 3 years. Here's the decision we're going to have to make then. This is assuming if we don't go with something like this. What will this look like in 5 years? What will we be putting there in 5 years, 10 years? As we wait to find some kind of a funding mechanism for the park, which I also think is a fantastic idea. But we need to find a funding mechanism for the park, how to pay for the park, how to pay for maintenance of the park. And it seems like at this point, you have your bond concept, but I wouldn't put a lot of stock in this after what we saw, last year. So your other option is rooftops, and slowly, through developer impact fees for the Parks Fund, build up your money over a 20-year period. And of course, if we go with our 75 units a year, you can build up that kind of money, okay? Now, going back to the history of this, and I started thinking about it, years ago, there was Bob Cabral Park. That was a concept off Olery. And it was a great idea. Everybody loved it. Great idea. Wonderful idea for the park. Let's do it. And of course, the concept to pay for it was to tie it in with developer. Was it Frontier Homes, I believe?
Yes.
Okay, great, sounds good. And then we hit a brick wall. Because when you start talking about development, and I remember those meetings, maybe you in this room remember those meetings. I've never seen before or since the house so packed with people who were really upset about the concept of developing and putting that many more rooftops in this town. So you go fast forward, what was that, 15 years to 2018, 2019. And this debate has kind of sort of, cropped up again. What do we want to be in the future? That was the purpose of the community meeting. And I know, we had plenty of Facebook posts back and forth and informal surveys, and granted, none of this is a formal survey. But the clear impression that we, or at least I have received, and I think maybe we are in agreement on this, is that needle towards wanting to build more rooftops in this town as a means to pay for some of the things that we want hasn't moved. It hasn't moved in 14, 15 years. So therefore, that funding mechanism for a park, the park that we all want, is out as well. So what's the funding mechanism? And, it boils down to me for one of those things where we don't have a funding mechanism. We don't see a funding mechanism on the horizon. Yeah, and I think Heflin said, 4th generation. So here's where we're at. We want something, but there's no way to afford it. So what do we realistically do with this land?
The question I have, before you get carried away here, Danny, the question I have is this. We've been down this road more than once. We took the time to do some sort of analysis of costs. And what was that cost at the time we did the analysis? Do we have a rough ballpark what it would cost?
Are you referencing to the park improvements?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Well, while she's looking at that, Mr. Mayor, I just want to just add, remember, that purchase, 31 acres, was purchased in 2005, and we came out from under that city in 2014. So there was 9 years of no income at all. So I think that another 2 or 3 years under this lease may not hurt the city. 9 years, no funding, no money, income.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The estimate to develop the park was 13 million.
Okay, $13 million, pocket change. There it is right in a nutshell, people. We would all love to have a new park. We don't have 15 million bucks to do it all at one time. So the question I heard this evening, the response was, well, we could do it in different segments. Maybe we could. I don't know. Did we ever do a study or do any kind of inquiry in terms of breaking that park down in segments?
Yeah, there were 3 different phases that were identified. 2 of them were roughly around the 5 million and one was 3 million.
Okay. Was there any different, counter effect if we did it in that, let's just suppose we had the money. Would there be a problem with doing it that way? Is there any negativity?
No.
Okay, so the park's around 13 million. We know that we could do it in segments for around 5 million a pop. That's still a lot of money we don't have. All right. Nobody wants to tie the park up for 30 years. I can see that, but I'm not sure what the options are gonna be. Now, one option possibly is we could do a different kind of crop. It doesn't have to be almonds, maybe. Maybe we could do a crop that was, you know, it's an annual crop or something. We'd get more revenue off of it anyway because we wouldn't have the expenditures to begin with. Like they grew melons out there or something, you'd have your money. So that's an option to think about, and you would be able to pocket money a little quicker maybe. But the biggest problem we have, and the bottom line here, is money. So I think if we could figure out how to get money, we could probably move forward on this idea. But in the meantime, we have a 3-year contract which will hold us and give us enough time to contemplate if nobody wants to step forward with the 20. The 20 doesn't impress me, to be honest with you. I know that these farmers work hard. I know they deserve what they get, but boy, we don't get squat. And I know that's the way it is, and just like Randy said, that's the way it is. But if there was a possibility of finding an alternative method to get that property to benefit the community more, that would be something we should consider. But I'm not sure what that is either. But I do think we should look at a possibility of a farming relationship on a shorter, or like a more of a year-to-year thing where that farmer wouldn't mind a year-to-year contract, if it's possible. I don't know. But I know there's watermelon people that grow watermelons, and there's melons, and there's alfalfa, and there's all kinds of crops. So maybe we could look at some alternatives and the type of crops we put out there that would bring in a little more money, and then we could have more flexibility in terms of what we did with the land. But I think the problem still boils down to one thing: money. And that's what we're gonna have to figure out. So, you know, we can talk about people and talk to people about they wanting stuff, and that's wonderful, I admire that, but the bottom line is, talk to them about how we get the money. That's what we need to come up with. Because if we can figure out how to come up with the money, then all you guys can have your park, and including myself, and that would be great. But to be honest with you, that's our biggest stumbling block.
So when we initially purchased this land, we had a lease with Bavaro Farms. And then they gave that lease up. When they gave up the lease, when they decided they were walking away, you know, I struggled to get, you know, farmers that were interested in the land, especially on a short-term lease. And I think that we even explored some of those one-time crops, and we couldn't find anybody at that time.
I don't disagree.
I believe most of those, the row crop farmers, I talked to a couple of Manteca too, they said, go with almonds. Go with almonds. You know, in terms of what kind of an agreement, you know, you could get between, you know, the farmer and the city in terms of profitability, go with almonds. Don't go with the row crop. And that's just the input that I got.
Well, I mean, there might be other input out there, I
Yeah.
don't know. And I'm not sure that's the final, or, the thing is, for me, I know it's a situation where the community is really concerned, they'd like to have the ground to use, and I don't have a problem with that. But my bottom line is always who's gonna pay for it? And unfortunately, no one's come up with that answer. And back to what you said earlier, you had a hell of a time finding someone to even be interested in the property. So if we're not gonna make a move and putting it into a 20-year lease, then I wanna see a plan that's gonna show us why we're not, and it makes sense and we can accomplish it in a reasonable amount of time. Having said that, I wouldn't be opposed to putting this off for a month or two more and see if we can get some more feedback that substantiates the desire for what the community wants. But if not, then what are we doing? I mean, we have to get something out of this thing, one way or the other. But I think if we can find some kind of alternative, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just don't see it.
Peter, you had something?
Yeah.
Oh, comic, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I agree with Angelo. I mean, if it's up to me, we'd sell this property tomorrow. And I know that that's not a popular idea because it's looked at up here as this asset. But if you really crunch the numbers, I mean, we're making $150,000 off of it over 20 years. If you sold it for $20,000 an acre, which is, I think, on the very low end at this point, you're going to make $360,000. It's going to take you 45 years to make that kind of money. I don't think this is an asset to the city. I think it's more of a liability because we have to keep dealing with it and we have to keep pretending we're farmers and trying to figure out how to squeeze all this, a couple pennies out of it. And And again, I don't think we'll ever have the money, ever, to build that regional park unless there's an act of God. And what I'm saying, though, is we can find a best of both worlds here. I'm not advocating for building the park or finding that funding mechanism. I'm advocating for trying to do another thing that benefits the community that's park-like, right? If you have a jogging, walking path around it, you keep the majority of the trees. We can talk to another farmer. We can plant whatever we want to plant. But Tammy, really quick, the money that's generated from this property goes into the park fund, right? How much is in there, right? $350 right now?
I think between the parks and the recreation, it's about that.
Okay, and so that $350,000 is earmarked to go towards the development of this park.
It's earmarked for parks and
Okay,
recreation.
parks and recreation. So, and I
It's
clarify.
almost 400,000.
Oh, it's almost 400,000. So, and I think we talked about the cost to build a 5-foot walking path around it. The engineer said it would be about 150,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the funding is there to do this project now. We just have to find a farmer that's willing to work with us and a way to, and this way, if we want to keep the trees, keep the land, don't develop it, no new rooftops, I get that, but we can also use it as a way to benefit the community. And I personally think it'd be wonderful to have it's almost a mile loop. I mean, I've looked at this. To me, it solves two problems. And, we keep the land, it's cash flow positive, albeit small, and we get to use it for the community. And so I would really not like to approve this tonight. I'd like to, at the very least, table it and find a way to make this, dual purpose thing happen, so.
Yeah, I was going to say on that point too, and I think part of the reason, Tammy, you had so much trouble finding a grower to tackle this is because, among the agriculture community, it is a big deal, that farmland-urban interface. It's a tough gig. A lot of farmers will not even touch it, regardless of what crop they grow. And so whether or not, like I say, I love the trail idea, but when I heard that the hesitation on it from Tilbury's, I get it. I mean, that hesitation is very much there, which is part of the reason I think it might be difficult to find anybody to really want to tackle this on, So, yes.
Angelo Blanco, 64 Fifth Street. I don't want to sell the property just to get rid of it. I wanted to sell half of it to develop the other half. And when you say $15 million, we're not going to spend $15 million. They come up with a plan like for New York City, and you guys give them $20,000 for $15 million, Escalon? I'd have laughed at them. Who's going to spend that money here? You ain't going to spend it. He's been talking about it for everything to be at it. I know. Okay, right now, we go to DeRussi's place. That's just plain old dirt. Anytime we have a function, there's 100 cars out there. Why can't we do it on our own property? You let them do it there. Nobody says you can't do it. Right. He's good enough to let us do it. We don't have to have blacktop over there. All we want a place when they come to have a function there, we could park somewhere besides parking on somebody else's property. They've been doing it for years, and everybody knows it. In the wintertime, they go there. The women walk in there, slosh in there. That's the only place to park. Well, why don't we do it on our own property? Take out a couple of rows of trees to start with. Like you said, if they don't want it, we'll plant watermelons, cantaloupe, we don't care. We want you to use that property. And I agree, who's going to spend $15 million?
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to get it.
Well, if we pay $20,000 to find out.
Yeah.
So you can tell us what happened, what are you going to do with it? We got the plans.
Yep.
They got drainage ditches, they got everything underwater, lights and everything for Escalon, $15 million. Come on.
Part of it was parking too.
We can do something with it, though. We can park like we park at DeRussi's. We've been doing it for years. Take out 4 or 5 rows of trees, and if we have to, plant the rest of them melon, like just grow crops until we figure it out. And he might have, he belongs to a lot of clubs. They may want to help us. They may want to build a sidewalk for us for nothing. Who knows? Yeah. But what I'm trying to, I don't want to just sell our problem and get rid of it. Right. It's hard enough we got it. I want to use it, take advantage of it.
Right.
I just wanted to get that square. I don't want to sell it to get rid of it. Right. But I was thinking we'd sell half of it to develop the other half if we had to. But I'd rather keep it all. Thank you.
No,
Well, the current plan
point
we
very well
have-
taken.
The current plan we have is in 3 segments, and those segments the prices are over the top. So if the plan is not to follow the plan that we paid $20,000 for, what's the new plan?
So I agree that the long-term lease is not the way to go, particularly tonight. And the purpose we entered into a short-term lease was to give us time to explore some of these alternatives on how we are gonna move forward on this property. I think it's an asset because we're already overgrown out there, and we need the space, and the parking issue is the number one. So we are using DeRussi's property at, his, good nature to allow us to do it. So we need to have the option to be able to expand. And the purpose behind getting rid of the property over here on Ulrey was because that was likely never gonna happen. But it made more sense to own the property that was adjacent to our Hogan Ennis Park. So I like the idea of slowing down, thinking this through, looking at our options. We have community groups that are interested in projects out there. There's really three things right now that are being talked about, or issues that we need to address. One is parking, 2 is the skate park, 3 is the walking path. You've got a nonprofit foundation that this city organized in 2011 to move forward on park projects, and that foundation was set up primarily to work on a skate park. And that board has been diligently working towards that goal since 2011. The community supports that, but it's very slow going. There's only so much capacity out there for donations. You have to have that one person that comes in and say, I'm gonna sign off on this thing, and I'll pay the $200,000 or $300,000 to get it done. But that person hasn't arrived yet. So in the meantime, you've got individuals in this community that are supporting this project. If you have a club like the Kiwanis Club or the Lions Club, and they are in a position to help move some of these projects forward, I think that's exactly what's gonna happen. $15 million or $13 million, that's gonna be difficult to do. It's gonna require us to go out and find money, or find a loan to do it, or do a bond that's gonna have to be repaid by the community. I don't know what the appetite is out there in this community. So, I say we leave it alone. We continue on the lease as it is. We explore the options with Kiwanis. We explore options with the Lions Club. We explore options with the Escalon Parks Foundation. We talk to them about projects, individual small projects, whether it's a skate park, a jogging path, or it's the parking out there. Those are the immediate concerns, the immediate needs, and what people in the community are working towards. So let's focus on those 3 elements. We've got money in the bank that's set aside for some of these projects. We've got a couple years to work on this. If it's something that we can do ourselves and control with the community, whether it's the expanded parking or whatever, that is a much better scenario for us. I even like the fact, if we're gonna end up getting in a long-term lease, that we pay for the replanting and the infrastructure out there, so we have complete control over when we wanna tear it out and put something else in, rather than committing that property to a 20-year lease with, almost a $500,000 payout, if we need to get out of it. So I don't see the benefit in option A at all at this point. Option B has a few more positives, but I just think we need to be realistic about this and know there are a handful of projects out there that we should be investing that park and rec money into to try and improve the functionality of the park and some of the options for younger people and older people.
So the farmer is open to the parking area and the skate park. It was just the jog path and the walk path that was the issue.
Because of the chemicals?
It was just the exposure to his orchard. It was combination of the chemicals, and then just the openness of the orchard opens it to vandalism or carelessness, really. Damages to the irrigation.
We understand the concern there, but we're in a position where we have a little bit of time. I don't think there's any pressure to get into
Right.
this lease, that we can explore this and see if it's even viable or not. If there's $20,000 through Kiwanis to actually put this in, and it's gonna cost $400,000, we might have a problem of even moving forward on it, but we should at least explore that. just to see the cost, you know, whether it's gonna be just a hard packed surface, or it's gonna be some sort of a, you know, a blacktop or concrete or running track type of, surface, I don't know. But it's worth exploring that. So that, my recommendation would be to just continue in the lease as it is, but start looking at that money that we have set aside and figure out how can we invest that now to make some of these improvements out there. 2 of them are already okay, the farmers are already okay with. The third one, we just need to kind of sort out and figure out if that's viable or not.
You may want to, part of the issue with the parking lot, and I agree with Angela, I think that the parking lot's a real-world need now. That's a real-world need now. But part of the issue with it was that, okay, do you try to, you know, to take the trees out and mock it up now a little bit? Or do you go through the actual process where you're laser leveling it along with the orchard to get the correct grade down so that, okay, fine, if you're not going to be able to park for 20 years, that's fine. You'll have a parking lot for 20 years at least to support your existing population at Hogan Field. So that's where a lot of that concept was coming from about, you know, the park. Now, I don't know if, I'm just about the parking. Now, I don't know if we can still just go ahead and put that parking in, you know, over the next couple of years, if we remain with the current lease. You know, I don't know. Now, my other thought, Councilmember Legero, if, you're right, you know, sometimes it takes a long time to save up the money or to grassroots, you know, which I think is a fantastic concept. Fundraise for the park, fundraise for any of these things. But if it's going to take us 25 years to fundraise for it, well, then you might as well just lease the thing out and be done with it. But we do have time. We do have time on this one. And that's kind of sort of where I keep coming back to is what realistically is going to happen over the next 20 years.
We have the option for both.
Yeah.
Because you need parking, you got a skate park, the skate park is already, they got the property, they got the builder, they got the plans all done, it's already in the master plan for the park out there. We should be supporting that, the farmer's okay with that, we should be supporting getting the parking lot in there. And while we're at it, let's look at this walking, jogging path, because I think this potentially gives us the best of both worlds. You get these elements to the park done that the community, well, there's a need and there's a want, so you can get that taken care of with money that's already been set aside for Parks and Rec. And then you can also have the farmer, so we're not expending money to care for, you know, barren property out there.
For the next 3 years.
Well, for
next 2
3,
years.
but if we are the ones that are gonna invest in trees or irrigation out there and not the farmer, if he wants to lease it for 20 years after we put some of these pieces in, that's something we can talk about because we'll control it. We have spent the money. We've made the $90,000 investment in trees and irrigation. And if we decide that we want to get out of that, we still have control.
Right, but the only tough part about that is ultimately when it comes to a lot of the hesitations that this grower has with the trail, you'll still have the same hesitations because liability-wise, most of the liability will come with the farmer who's actually spraying the pesticides, managing the irrigation system. That, you know, that needs to be a consideration too.
Right, but that should be explored. I mean,
Yeah.
what really are those liabilities? What are we on the hook for to
Right.
indemnify him with? So those are all things that need to be looked at before we make a decision one way or another on that. But since there is a community organization that is looking for that type of a project, that project fits with what we'd like to see out there. And the likelihood of building it in a $15 million or a $5 million phase is highly unlikely. Let's see what we can accomplish with what is out there in the time that we have under this lease. If it's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to go anywhere. But we can always enter into that long-term lease after we've explored that. And even with the long-term lease, we still get the skate park and we get the parking. So I'm not seeing a downside with moving forward in that direction and let them explore it.
Well, no, that's fine. The only other thing I would add though with the trail is if we go that route, then we need to ask ourselves, what realistically will we be able to do with that land? You know, again, if you have, you know, okay, if you don't want to have a grower touching it, you know, in terms of row crops or almonds or anything like that. So again, if the trail goes in, I think it's a great concept. What will we do with the rest of that property?
Well, I
at
think,
that point. And that's something that needs to be considered down the road, too.
because you'll see people running and jogging and walking up and down Ulrey to
Mm-hmm.
Brennan. They're in the field, they're not on the street. They're walking on the shoulder, they're walking on part of the actual
But-
property where the crops or where the trees are.
But you know, from a liability issue, all it takes is one.
Sure.
All
but
it takes
that's-
is one.
You know, but that's, speaking, that's the way it is.
So where do we go from here?
I have a question, really.
Well, is this a motion kind of thing? Or are we just
It
looking for
was
direction?
intended to be a motion, but we can probably morph it into just consensus at this point as well. So,
I have a,
I understand the consensus thing, but my question is, what happens next?
for what?
If we decide tonight to not go forward, which I have no issue with, what do we do next?
I think we at least need to give some kind of direction to staff. Because if we don't go this route, I think there's a lot of things that we would need to explore. Conversely, you know, you guys out there that are interested in doing something grassroots, I think that's gonna buy you guys some time to start that process as well. So,
The question
what
is,
month in
how much time do we allow?
2021 is it?
well, theoretically, we can allow 2.5 more years
If we don't scare off the grower.
if we don't scare off the grower, yes, if we don't scare off
I
the
got a
grower.
quick question. So how, the house generates how much a year?
15,000,
And what are the property taxes on that?
about 9,000.
Okay, so if we took out all the trees and didn't plant anything and just had dirt there, we're still cash flow positive. The city's not losing any money.
Well, somebody has to make sure that dirt stays dirt and not.
Yeah, well, then you're gonna have to maintain the dirt
Is that gonna
Because
cost?
that's what-
and that stuff.
Well, I'm just saying, we making it seem like it's this big crisis if we don't plant something or sign a big lease with a farmer, and it's not. The thing doesn't make any money now, and it will make very little less money if we do nothing with it. So I think that we just need to relax on this thing about tying that land up. I think we can find the best of both worlds. I like, you know, all these ideas of the parking, skate park, jogging path. You get elements of the park, like Councilman Legero said. We can make it happen. We just have to want to make it happen. We have money. We have grassroots. Let's find a way.
What's the likelihood of that parking area being able to be built to some dependable level of drainage and all that good stuff if we continue down this path? Because if we want to, I'd hate to see that thing being put off another 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
So I don't know that I can really answer that question. I mean, I know that when we were initially talking with the farmer, he was like, yeah, we can pull the two rows out. Then we had a really rainy
Right.
winter, so it was delayed of when we could do it. Then when we got to it, it was voiced about concerns about, you know, when you pull those trees out, that land is not gonna be compacted. So it's not gonna be like what we park on at the corner of Arthur and Escalon below to Escalon Avenue, DeRussi's lot, because that has been parked on and compacted for so many years that it can withstand the parking side of it. But when you look at the orchard where it's been, you know, it's been plowed or it's been tilled or whatever, you don't have the compaction there
Can't we
because
compact it? And they're construction companies that's what they do.
And that's probably where, well, that was where I think, yeah, you know, no, and that's where probably the orchard removal process is gonna come in. And then you do all that stuff then, and boom, you've got your parking lot,
right.
you know.
So, and I mean, yeah, we can hire somebody to do that, but the whole concept behind it was at a minimal cost,
Saved us a lot of money.
trying to do that.
Yeah.
Because it would, you know,
I mean,
it's not the location of a permanent parking area. It was supposed to be dirt. It wasn't supposed to be developed.
So I guess, can I make a motion to table this? Will that move it forward tonight, at least? Just table this discussion until a later date, you know?
it's a 2/3 vote. Just make a regular motion to postpone it. Postpone
Okay,
it,
can I
postpone
do
it,
that now? Is everybody good with
Postpone
that?
it, definitely, yeah.
Hey, before that motion, do we need to give staff some direction on a couple of these things?
Yeah, sure.
Given the money that's set aside in the Parks and Rec Fund, the interest of the community to have something done out there, and the parking needs, I think it would be beneficial to have staff bring back, here's the cost for parking, we've met with, you know, the the Escalon Parks Foundation. This is what they need to finish up the skate park. And we've met with Kiwanis or these other community organizations that are interested in investing in this walking and jogging path. And this is what we think the cost is gonna be here. And get those costs, and then we can figure out how we wanna spend the money that's in that, in the Parks and Rec Fund, if we want to at all. And we'll get feedback from the community on how we wanna move on some of these things. Two of those projects are clearly not gonna impact the farmer and what he's doing out there at this point. The third one, we just need to investigate some costs, and then we need to talk about liability and how that project could actually get done. Because I'd rather talk about what can we do rather than about what we can't do out there. And we have options and we have money, so let's see what we can do to achieve this.
Well, I'll just caution you, it won't be in the next month because staff's plate is full already, so.
Well, gee, I was gonna
yeah.
add to that.
Yeah.
Again, the concept of long-term lease in the orchards, because as much as we want to do this, you know, again, don't know where the money's gonna come from. Don't know, you know, how we're gonna handle this, you know, what kind of a grower. Once this orchard's gone, who is gonna wanna come in? And again, I love this trail concept, you know, but who's going to want to come in? I mean, I know that, you know, we say, yeah, you see people jogging on Old Rail all the time. They do. But I'll tell you what, now I may be the only one here with a little bit of background of farming. The grower is like this when they see that kind of stuff, you know, because it is a constant liability issue that they have to deal with. So I think that whatever we look at, you know, trail or whatever we need to do, what are realistic options for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Okay, in terms of what are we gonna do with that property? Okay,
But we-
who is going to want to farm it?
But we do need to look into it and see what the options
Yeah.
are.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a project that impacts young and old
Mhm.
and, you know,
For the
people that
trail?
have mobility issues.
Mhm.
Well,
So that's the
he's
kind
gonna
of
have to worry
project that
about
we should be
equipment
looking
getting
at and
around.
trying to get done here if there's a way to do it. So I think we need to look at it from that perspective as opposed to the farmer's perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah, it might be a deal breaker with the farmer,
Mhm.
but it's certainly something that I think is affordable and a great investment for the community at this point. I think the points are well made about the walkability of the community, and it's not particularly stellar, right? So this would be a great option, but we have to look at that. And as far as funding mechanisms, other jurisdictions, they talk about in lieu funds, right? So if you're a builder and you can pay for your habitat, you know, preservation, or you can mitigate it yourself. Well, here, as developers come in, if we have a developer that wants to come in and is gonna pay developer impact fees, maybe we can start looking at like, okay, those developer impact fees for this particular project are gonna go to put a soccer field in, or they're gonna go to put in a baseball diamond, or a backstop, or whatever it is. So we gotta be creative with that to try and start figuring out how to fund Parks and Rec.
But that's, the monies that we're talking about, that's where they've come from, is developer impact fees.
Exactly, so, but that's, you know, if we're having money that's coming in, we can earmark it for this project or that project, or you can spread it around to the projects that we need. But we gotta be more creative about it. The money's coming in for Parks and Rec. If it's just gonna sit in the fund and not be used for these projects that the community wants, then, you know, we're not listening and we're not being creative.
All I'm saying is just start with that parking lot. That's the one thing I really see as an issue now. So, is that clear as mud for you?
Nope.
Nope? Okay. Well, let's start off with the easy part. You guys out there, this is gonna buy you time. If you wanna do some grassroots, boom, this is a starting gate, okay? So we got that going. Okay, so what would we like to do on this issue tonight? We do not have to make it in the motion form, but we at least need to definitely give consensus.
Staff is pretty much.
Give them
it's gonna be a
direction.
while. Staff's gonna be a while before they can get on it, so what are we gonna do? We're just gonna table it and then, have it come back and when they're ready to give us something more to go on, right?
Postpone it indefinitely. That's a motion, yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to postpone this issue indefinitely.
Okay. Motion's been made.
Can I amend that?
Yeah, of course.
With staff direction?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That was it. Do you accept the amendment?
I do, yeah.
All right, so I agree that we need to table this. But I would also like staff direction to move forward on the parking costs and options for the parking out there. I know it's been talked about, but let's get serious about it now. The skate park, reaching out with the Parks Foundation, find out where they're at, and see if an infusion of money from our Parks and Rec Fund would finish that project. And third, to meet with those that are interested, whether it's Kiwanis or other groups or individuals that are interested in that jogging path, to actually kind of flesh that out a little bit to see what our options are for the cost, type of project, the impact on that the property and the farmer out there.
How much of this do you want to put on staff with a full plate?
It sounds like it's all on it, on stuff.
Who else to do it?
You got a group of people that are excited about here to get going. I think it's a great concept if they get moving on some of it.
You want to meet with council, and council
Yeah.
then talks to staff? Or do you
Sure.
want a staff member to meet with staff and council member and
Well, I'd like to have a couple council members meet with staff and these individuals, and I'm sure you'd like to be one. I'm sure you'd like to be the other.
Sure.
One other question before you go any further. On these improvements, that we're spending money on this park over here, can the community use that money without have to do prevailing wage? How's that work?
They can't use our money
Our
to
money
do
being the
it.
city's money?
Right.
So the city's money has to go through a prevailing wage environment?
Yes.
it's not getting done any other way.
Yeah, I have a question.
Take a look.
There's a question in the back, Mr. Eflin.
I'm still Rick Heflin, I haven't changed.
Okay.
Just quick question, because you meant about the city's money. If we put forth money and we put forth, like, people that are construction people and stuff, and they help build it, is that something we can do and use that money? Because that money's gonna go a lot farther, obviously, than your money by the rules.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
You can do the project, and then you can give the project to the city. Yep. And there's
So-
no prevailing wage issue there.
Yeah, so yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if if our funds are gonna go to that project and we're gonna intermingle those funds, then we gotta.
Then you'd have to go through the RFP and all that.
Right,
all
right.
that stuff.
So if you guys do it, yeah.
Better to skip
it's-
all of us and.
Yeah.
And
No, you're right. You're right.
The first point you made was, our money, and we gotta remember, this isn't our money, this is the
Well-
community money. This
I
is-
apologize, but I'm
No,
looking
that's
at
me too.
the community money this side of the room.
No, I said the same thing, because this
Yeah.
is the community's money.
Right.
It's just if it comes from the city coffers, there's a prevailing wage element. If it comes from, unless Ed gets his way and it becomes a population
30,000,
issue.
good idea.
But if it does come from a community organization, individuals, that's.
Because I was checking, because when I was track coach, I leveled the whole track. And Laser did it, but we didn't have to go that route because I did it with my club.
I would
Right.
venture to guess that you have resources out in the community that would bend over backwards to help you accomplish whatever goal it is that you set your mind to. So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's important to explore this, because I think if anybody's gonna get it done, you would get it done, so.
Thank you.
We'll be as best we can.
Do we know how close, because I was excited tonight to hear about the skate park, because I've been involved in that forever. Do we know how close the skate park is?
They're probably a third of the way there. They've got the property finally sorted out, because that took several years to get that figured out. But the property is dedicated to it. They have builder, and they have the plans, and now it's a matter of money. So a couple $100,000 would finish it, no doubt.
And we're also, we still have to go through the process. When we do it, whether it's public or private, plans have to be drawn, engineering has to be done. It's the same procedure. The good news is we don't have to pay for prevailing
Yeah.
wage. But everything else stays the same.
Correct.
We just don't turn people loose on the property, say, go do what you feel like, and then we're done, let's work that. It doesn't work that way. So just a little heads up that while I love the spirit, just remember, there's some hurdles to go through.
Right, I figured that part. Thank you.
Okay, motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone this matter indefinitely? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by, please, by saying nay. Aye. Motion passes 4-1. Okay, item number 9, this is discussion on senior activities.
Sorry, who, 4 to 1?
Who voted against it?
I voted against it.
Huh?
I voted against it.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Okay.
Okay, motion number 9, discussion on senior activities.
So I just wanted to let the council know that I was reached out to by Ann Shaddix with the Lutheran Church about, well, actually, I should say staff was reached out a few months ago in regards to setting up some additional senior activities at the community center. And they have come back to staff with a plan to do one afternoon a month, some kind of social event. August is planned to be an ice cream social. September, I think, was back to school or something like that. Initially, they proposed to do it on a Friday afternoon. And we discouraged them from the Friday afternoon primarily because of rentals and people coming in wanting to set up before if they have a Saturday event. And if they have an event there, getting the cleaners in between maybe a setup of another event and their event would be very difficult. So they have said that they were okay with a Wednesday. They don't want to do it on the same day as senior lunch, which is Tuesdays and Thursdays, because they think it would make too long of a day for the seniors. So they wanted to do a different day. So they are proposing to do it on Wednesdays right now. They're going to use the senior room for that event. And I just wanted to really let the council know that that would be coming, make sure that there's no objections to that. They're going to be using the senior room, which, is paid for with money for the seniors. They have voiced if it grows the potential of trying to use the larger room. But at this point, they're just going to do the one day a month till the end of the year and then evaluate it from there. So
Any questions on that?
while we're still under staff communications, there was one other item I wanted to mention to the council, and that is staff has recently reached out to the county because they are doing some chip seal projects close to the city. So we have reached out to them, and they are willing to help us with some of our projects. Here in the future, there'll probably be an agreement coming to you guys, coordinating with the county to do some of our chip seal projects. So we don't have to go out to bid. We're gonna incorporate their manpower.
Nice.
Fantastic. By the way, a little bit of a backdrop on the seniors and the people who are interested in getting that going. That was actually born out of the community meeting and wanting to get involved in the community, just like what you guys are talking about now. And so I think anytime that happens, that's a great thing. But yeah, I just want to give you background. That's where that started. That's great to
We
hear.
put it in our newsletter for those interested in assisting with getting it going and stuff. So I don't know how much of a contact information she got for that. I do know that there's 3 of them that are primarily involved in that.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay. Isolde, that's it?
That's it.
Okay, matters presented from the audience. At this time, public can address any matter that's not on the agenda that is within the authority of the city council. Try to keep it to 5 minutes, please. We're already an hour and a half into the meeting, but we do want to hear what you have to say. So, and why do I see people laughing already? Who would like to speak first? Okay.
I nominated him.
Ready, set, go over here. Russell Fowler, Assembly Member Heath Floor's office. It's a privilege to be here with you tonight. I just wanted to say how much I really enjoyed Park Feet Week and the weekend. I really enjoyed the senior luncheon. It was a pleasure to meet Mr. and Mrs. Alcorn, hear about all they do for the community, and the parade was just fantastic. There are many times where in this job you work from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, and but days like that make it all worth it from my perspective. And was glad to bring my parents along with me and show them the city, and they were very impressed as well. Unfortunately, my mom wants a llama now due to the petting zoo that we saw, so we're gonna have to
Alpaca, to be exact.
Alpaca, excuse me, that's a political no-no. But we're gonna have to find a way to navigate that. But we were very impressed. So many great people out there. Really just want to commend the city for the great work that they did. The staff, the Lions Club. I know everybody has a hand in that. So I wanted to take a time to present you guys with a certificate of recognition for your park feat and say job well done. I don't know who wants to accept it, but
Why don't you take it? Yeah.
Get the blood flowing here. We've been sitting for a while. Good. That's very well
The thing you went to was real fun. Get us to 30,000 and less, so we can stop paying our money to government.
My job is to make you happy, Ed. So to make you happy, I will try to do.
Show everybody on the meeting. Hey, yeah. Hey, Russell, appreciate it very much. Actually, there's a whole group of people that I'd like to show that to that are very involved in Park Feed, and they spend an awful lot of time on it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And again, it was
On
a
behalf of
pleasure
the
to be out
community.
there. I didn't get any candy from the city float, so I didn't know if you guys were trying to
Well,
send
that's
me a
not my
message
fault.
like get out of here.
What are you guys doing?
I'm sore from throwing so much.
But
Next year we'll make a purpose of getting to you on that.
I look
By then
forward
you
to
should have that resolution done.
yes, yes. And I will say, I just want to make a point. I stopped by the Escalon Museum, Historical Society, and it was just wonderful.
Yes, it is.
Really
Yes, it is.
enjoyed
Do a great job.
and seeing kind of the history of the community. So my hat's off to them as well.
Okay, very good.
Any questions for me?
Yeah.
What's up?
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was also my dog's birthday. We have the same
wow.
birthday, so
Yeah, perfect.
it became more about my dog as the day went on. But thank you very much. It was a good birthday, and glad to be surrounded by family. I appreciate it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Who'd like to come up and speak? Again, if it's any non-agendized item, so there are a few items that are on the agenda that I'm sure some of you are here for. But if it's anything else, please come up.
Kenny Fox, 1510 Adriana. A couple things in regards to Park Feet. It was always a great event. While I was out walking around, I talked to a couple of people that appeared on social media, and someone was saying that next year is the 99th year. So we're getting, or welcome to the 99th, so we're getting close to the centennial, 100 years. But looking back at the history of Park Feet, that was in 1922.
Thank you.
1922, and so 100 years would make it 20,022 for Park Feet. So I got some good information from the Historical Society regarding the history of Park Feet. And very quickly, just going back to the issues about any park in the city, that's what Park Feet was all about. Actually, in 1911, 1922 was about service clubs and the community coming together, having an event, raising some money, and putting it aside to better the parks within the city. And the very first one in 1922, they cost them $98. With the proceeds, they made $42 profit. And so they went out and bought a couple of bushes. They had set aside about one square section of what we know as Main Street Park. So they had a vision. They took their time, a little bit at a time. They didn't have to worry about spending, back then, $500 was huge to them. They did it $90 at a time every year. And I think that's what we should be doing with this park down on Main Street and the one out there. So, yeah. 2022 Centennial. Thank you.
Hey, it could all happen again. But yeah, thank you very much for pointing that out. I don't know how 99 years got into everybody's head this weekend, because you're right, it is 2022. So Anybody else before we move on to administrative matters? Actually, yeah, to administrative matters. Seeing none, let's go ahead and go on to item number 10. And I believe this sounds like this should be Dominique.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. We've got a series of public hearings tonight, so I'll try to make it as quickly as possible. Our first one is introducing and waiving the first reading of an ordinance amending our municipal code, section 17.41140, regarding accessory dwelling units, which were formerly referred to as secondary dwelling units. This item did go before the Planning Commission in both May and June. As indicated in the staff report, we've had a couple different legislation move forward over the last few years. State mandates requiring cities to make changes to their municipal code. So our current regulation regarding secondary dwelling units, or ADUs, is currently null and void until we update it. Since the passage of these laws, staff's worked with legal counsel, reviewed our legislation, and we had spoken with legal counsel about doing just what the state wants, nothing more excessive than that at this point, because we don't have a ton of those coming in at this point in time. The Planning Commission held their public hearing and discussion on the ordinance in May, and then had some follow-up questions that they asked staff to take care of in June. They unanimously approved a recommendation to forward the ordinance to City Council to both review and adopt as drafted and presented by city staff. In summary, the ordinance amendment will provide the following major updates. It will redefine the definition of a secondary dwelling unit to an accessory dwelling unit, the new term. Identifies two different types of ADUs, which would be additions and new accessory units, and existing structure ADUs, which would include garages. Exempts ADUs from any CEQA requirements or environmental reviews, so we'd no longer be able to call it a project if it needed to go before Planning Commission. And they've also removed any discretionary approvals. So any project that has an ADU in it is no longer allowed to go before a board for any approvals. It has to be handled in-house, ministerially, over the counter. Holds ADU reviewing and processing strictly to the ordinance on ADUs only. So if you review the ordinance, we do have a table in there that addresses many different areas besides just the legislation, landscaping requirements, parking requirements. It all had to be put under one ordinance to not require somebody to have to go through our code in different areas to look through it. So we made sure everything was compact that we wanted addressed in that one ordinance. Sets a minimum floor area of 150 square feet, which is considered a high-efficiency unit. We currently have a maximum floor at 1,200 square feet. We did not have a minimum set, so this would set the minimum floor size. Reduces the parking requirement to one off-street parking space, and permits the space in setback area and driveway/tandem driveways, and it also provides circumstances for which an ADU can be exempt to parking requirements. Our current code, which is not in effect at this point in time, required one off-street covered parking. So they have removed the city's ability to require covered. It can be off-street, no covered, as well as using any setback areas that we currently have in effect for structures. So if they wanted to park on the side of the house and that type of thing, they would be able to use that as their parking or somewhere within their driveways only, as long as it's just off the street. Removes the city's current setback requirements for existing garages applying to convert to an ADU, and requires a setback of no more than 5 feet from side and rear lot lines be required for an ADU constructed above a garage. It does not allow ADUs to be considered a new residential use for purposes of connection fees, a service that shall be proportionate to the burden of the proposed ADU based upon its size or the number of its plumbing fixtures. Provides exemptions for the conversion of existing structures, which require that an ADU be exempt from the design and development standards if it meets 4 criteria related to zoning, existing space, independent exterior access, and sufficient side and rear setbacks for fire safety. Further allows ADUs to not be subject to fire sprinklers if the primary residence does not have them, and also not be required to install a new or separate utility connection directly between the ADU and the utility, or to be charged a related connection or capacity charge. It sets a time limit of 120 days for city review and approval and requires the ministerial review, as I indicated earlier. And in the event, of course, we've got to put that last line in there, that there's any conflict between the city's ordinance and California government code, the government code will prevail. So we did discuss some optional requirements with the Planning Commission. The state has given us some areas where they allow us to maintain some control. One of them explored was owner occupancy, which would require the property owner that owns that property to live in either the primary or secondary dwelling unit on the property. Planning Commission did ask, how would we be able to control that as the city? And the answer is, we wouldn't be able to control it unless we had some type of process in effect. It was more labor intensive than anything. We did have council discuss, asking for people to submit an annual tax return, doing things like that, which is just something that at this point in time, they did not recommend moving forward with. So we did not include that in the ordinance. However, if it is something you want us to explore, add into the ordinance, you're allowed to obviously change the recommendation. We also had a discussion on prohibiting short-term rentals, which are typically rentals that are less than 30 days. But we don't foresee Escalon having very many of those at this point in time, but we have been instructed by the Planning Commission that they do want staff to look into establishing an ordinance regarding Airbnbs, which is something we have discussed in the past that we are working on, along with some other items we have going. A few other items that were brought up that they asked staff to look into and come back to at the June meeting was, since the state's legislation is moving forward because they want units to be more affordable, and they're considering this, it's a fulfillment of establishing some affordable housing, whether or not the city should deed restrict all ADUs to be affordable, which would basically place a deed restriction on the property, requiring the process to make sure that the people who are moving into them are affordable, which is a whole process on income verification and that type of thing. It is our understanding from council that disturbs the intent of what the state is trying to do. Their ideology of this legislation is as simple as it's a smaller unit, it's a secondary unit, it's not a main house, therefore it should automatically be at a lower cost, lower pay, and therefore it should help more on affordability. So they were not it would only constrict it more as well, because most people that are providing accessory dwelling units are renting them out to family members as well, and now they'd have to have their family members' income checked and those type of things. So it wouldn't help in the spirit of the legislation. They did ask whether CC&Rs are affected in this legislation. CC&Rs are not discussed in this legislation, so currently it's our understanding that CC&Rs would run the way they continue to be running, which is a private civil matter that would be handled with whatever advisory committee is responsible for those, and the city does not enforce them. We have our own regulations separate from CC&Rs. The third item was on the owner occupancy. They did want us to follow up on that as well, just to make sure whether it was something they would want to move forward with, and our response there was that it's generally a complaint-based system, so it would be difficult to enforce in that fashion, and then we'd have to ask for proof of residency on an annual basis by tax return, and most cities don't do that, and so it wasn't something that the Planning Commission saw in moving forward with. So the city's ordinance pertaining to secondary accessory dwelling units currently doesn't meet state standards. A failure to amend the city's ordinance to meet the state's requirements limits the city in its ability to regulate and maintain local control of ADUs that are constructed in Escalon. By adopting the ordinance that complies with state law, at least the city is able to maintain some level of local control at the extent possible at this time. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, the thing that makes me laugh is they want affordable housing, they keep sticking us all the new changes on the building. Sprinklers in houses.
Solar next year.
Solar next year. I mean, how do you get affordable housing when the state keeps ramming that stuff down your throat?
Dominique,
Put your garage, live in your mailbox.
Dominique, ultimately, you're gonna want this, you're gonna want a motion of acceptance, right, or non-acceptance of
Yes,
this, right?
an introduction and waiving of
Sure,
the first
okay.
reading, and then it is an ordinance, so it will come back at the next meeting for its second reading and adoption, and then it will take 30 days to become effective, which the date would be September 4th.
And it is a public hearing as well, so I'd like to turn it over to the council first. All right, turn the council first before we turn over to the public.
Sure.
Any initial
Where does the city
questions?
of Escalon benefit from this?
Wow.
I'm not sure how to answer that. It's not really something that has beneficial value in the extent that another reasoning they move forward with this legislation kind of on the side as a, instead of the number one reason was affordability, was the idea that if they put in this type of legislation and remove some connection fees like water and sewer, made things easier, basically, by lessening the local control that we have on them, the ability should be better for some people, maybe in the extent that they're not doing them illegally, they would actually come to the city and obtain the permit, and it's supposed to streamline it more to an extent where our control is lessened,
They're
in the
good at
hopes
giving away
that,
our fees, why don't they give away some of their fees? I mean, that's pretty stupid. I mean, they want us to give up our fees, but they're not willing to back down on anything they want. And not only that, they're dictating to you it's like rent control. They're telling you what you can basically rent that unit for.
No, they're not.
No.
they're not, we don't have anything rent control wise. No, it's just,
Affordable,
it's,
you're calling it affordable.
Oh, no.
No.
they're calling it affordable. It's an accessory dwelling unit.
What's the
They're-
definition of affordable?
Well, affordable, by the legal state requirement, they put out an annual number on, number of people on the household income, and we get that distributed amongst counties, so we get that annually, which I have at my desk, but I don't have it on me. They're automatically claiming or automatically taking the stance that because it's a secondary dwelling, which is smaller and limited in size, 1,200 square feet, to the primary residence, and they're lessening restrictions on it for parking and taking away some fees, sewer and water connection fees, that it should, in essence, be cheaper than a primary house to be able to be rented. So if your house is being rented or your house payment is $2,400 and you build this secondary dwelling based on the size, and what it comes with, the parking is different, everything's smaller, that type of thing, it should be $1,200, which is more affordable than $2,400.
So when you apply for this permit, is parking taken into consideration?
Originally, our requirement is one covered parking for an accessory dwelling unit. They have taken away the covered portion, and they just have one off-street parking, and then they've also made it, given it the ability to count your driveways, and side yards, rear setbacks, those type of things as a way to park. So as long as it's just off the street, where we would have, our original requirement would have been, you need one covered parking space, show us where it's going to go on your property, and then we're gonna check the setback on those and make sure it's covered, and that you're also serving your parking for your primary use. So it could be denied if your property is too small, or if you couldn't
Currently.
fit the parking
What
currently.
motivated this
Yeah.
whole thing?
Affordable housing. The state's requirement and need for affordable housing.
We tried that here before, over there by Plaza in that area, and then as soon as the market blew up, everyone sold and tripled their money and got out. So those affordable houses were market value at that point.
They are market value from what I can tell. I mean, they're,
Right. Gentlemen.
I wasn't here when that one went forward, but yeah, I mean, those are the smaller houses in town, ranging between 900 to 1,200 square feet on smaller lots.
Let me get to the public hearing portion of this, let's get the public involved with this, and let's start the public hearing now, please. Would anybody like to come up and speak on this issue? Going once? Yep.
Gary Haskin, 471 Cabernet Court. One way to check on the owner occupancy is county records have whether it's owner occupied or non-owner occupied. And the city gets those records, everybody, it's pretty easy to pull that up. That'd be a quick and easy thing to do, rather than, if I was someone and you asked me for my tax returns, you wouldn't get them. But there is that option, it's county information.
Okay. I wasn't aware.
Thank you. Dave, you want to say something?
Dave Willis, 425 Sultana. In my cruising around on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you mentioned the size, lot size. I don't see where there's going to be a whole lot of lots available to build accessory buildings in here, because these new houses going in up here, there is no extra room, and, you know, so it'd be like the older part of town on Fisk and off of First Street and out that way. So I don't even see why the city's even bothering with it. There'll be so few that are able to build, and then how many out of those few that want to build will build? And if we don't build, does the governor get on our case if we don't build?
The other question is, it's gotta go through review. So your neighbors have input. Now,
No.
neighbors don't get any input.
No more discretionary review, so it will not be put out to your neighbors.
That's garbage.
You don't need their permission anymore, in terms of accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
So they can build a two-story, or have a two-story dwelling unit looking down on the neighbors?
We can limit, we do have second-story regulations in the code, which are very
apply to
similar,
this?
into the ordinance, that are very similar to what we have. So if there's no second stories in the vicinity of the
no input from
area,
the
we can deny that, but no input from the neighborhood, no.
Is there any additional input from the audience on this public hearing before I take it back to council? All right, seeing none, public hearing is closed. And I have a question. If we do not accept this is largely basically to come into compliance with the state.
Yeah.
What is and it doesn't sound like we're exactly thrilled about it.
No.
What happens if we don't accept it?
So the planning commission wasn't thrilled about it either. At least with establishing an ordinance that meets the state mandates, they do allow us some control in specific areas. If we do not adopt the ordinance, we have to follow government code 100%, which gives us no control. It's all state-related. So adopting the ordinance will at least give us some control in some areas.
Okay.
And of course, as planning, I mean, my department's always looking into the long range, and we're imagining every house in town building an accessory dwelling unit and what that's gonna look like. And it will look a lot like these larger cities in town, San Francisco, Oakland, those type of areas, which we're not at all. And so, it's hard when they mandate something that is something that is dealt with in areas like San Francisco and Oakland. We're not anywhere near that, and you're still making us have to do this, but we don't have a choice at this point in time, so.
Russell, you hearing this?
Yeah,
Okay.
just a few thoughts, if I could.
Please.
Obviously, it's a really tough issue. We've dealt with it a lot. I certainly understand your viewpoints. Hope you can all hear me regardless.
Yeah.
But I think we certainly understand your viewpoints. It's very hard to craft a blanket legislation that applies to everybody. Obviously, for Escalon, it doesn't really match or fit per se, but for cities like Modesto that we represent and other cities, there's a huge need for it. So I certainly can understand your frustrations. As far as, do we have to comply, I would caution you against not complying, because the governor has threatened lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. So just wanted to give you a little bit of caution there. I know,
Okay.
I personally, I understand and I get it. Unfortunately, once you get to that state level, it's very hard to craft policies uniquely for one community. So, I mean, the simple fact of the matter is it's not the greatest system, it's not the best by any means, but it's the best that we have, and this is a huge issue for our community. So, fortunately, it falls upon us as leaders to try to address the issues. So,
Okay.
I'm more than happy to take any other questions or comments on it as well.
I appreciate your input very much. This is a motionable item, so I will ultimately need a motion. I think we've kind of painted the picture as to what we're looking at, what we're up against, what our options are. So if you have any further questions, please ask them. If you are prepared to make a motion, please do so.
As distasteful as this is, and how the state continues to say, hey, why don't you just vote to give up some of your local control and we won't take it from you? I mean, there is no,
There it is.
there's no option here. It's, you either vote and you maintain the least amount that's possible to maintain, or you say no and then you get sued. So, you know, it's just what we deal with on a regular basis here. So that being said, I would move on staff's recommendation.
Okay, and I will assume that, all of that was part of your motion. Hopefully Jamie can get it all in there.
Down there.
Because yes, motion's been made.
I have discussion, just a real quick question. So what if we,
Is there a second
Oh.
first on, or will it die for lack
I'll
of a second?
second it.
Okay. Motion's been moved and seconded. Discussion, please.
just real quick, if a small city like us decides not to comply with a state mandate like this, and the threat is that there's a lawsuit or they'll sue us, could they sue us and bankrupt us and just, I mean, what would they really do? Why don't we just say no and you go do what you want and we're gonna make a stand and there you go? And so it's, I mean, what if that happened? I mean, stormtroopers? I just don't know. I'm just curious. I think we should try it.
Well, you know, one of this ordinance does benefit property owners who want to put an accessory dwelling unit in their yard and rent it out. In my neighborhood in Sacramento, everybody's doing it.
Well, I'm not even arguing. I don't care at all who it benefits or anything. The point is local control. The point is what's good for our city, and we decide.
But if somebody in Escalon wanted to apply to put one in their yard, and the ordinance had not been updated, then they could sue and win because.
So a person could sue.
Person could sue,
us.
yeah, right.
Okay, I'm trying to figure the legal thing out.
And the
here.
remedy would be that a court would order the city to update its ordinance. That's all. It
Oh,
wouldn't
well, you
be
make
a
it harder
money.
for him. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table?
No.
Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote, and we'll see where the chips lie. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Hey,
I'd like to move this to a hand count. All those opposed, please signify by saying, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. The motion passes 3-2.
Disgusting what the state does to us. It's just old disgusting.
And just as a point of what Ann said, there are some benefits in the aspect with the property's large enough, and, you know, originally how our ordinance was, we had the ability to be able to control that, so we had larger lots would be able to do it, larger rear setbacks, so that it didn't affect
But the neighbors
property
have no
owners.
input.
Yeah, so that's what's
That is
changed.
that is
So there are
so-
some benefits for the right types of property, what the
What
city
about the
would see
neighbors?
as the right
They
property.
don't have any choice. They get stuck with it whether they like it or not.
Let's move-
That's not property
yeah.
rights.
Yeah,
Let's move on to the next item, item number 11, and this, I assume, is going to be Dominique as well.
yes. Everything public hearing tonight is me. So this item is introduction and waiving of the first reading for an ordinance adopting an amended zoning map and approving a rezone for 2 parcels, reviewing and approving the tentative vesting parcel map, and adopting a resolution approving the filing of a Class 32 categorical exemption and general plan land use designation amendment from commercial to residential. The property being discussed tonight is 1400 Countrywood Lane. It is the current area where the sales trailer for Windward Pacific is located. In 2013, it was a 2.5-acre area along McHenry Avenue and Countrywood Lane. It was parceled out and sold to allow for the development and construction of the Dollar General store and the O'Reilly Auto Parts. The remaining area, which is approximately .871 acres, has remained vacant since. Over the years, the property owner was interested in developing multifamily housing, but had difficulty penciling it out as an emergency access easement was needed, and there did not appear to be enough space to provide the easement and build enough units to make the project financially feasible. The property owner also had difficulty working out an agreement with Dollar General on sharing access of their easement. The applicant is requesting to rezone parcels currently zoned C2, community commercial or retail commercial, along McHenry Avenue and Countrywood Lane into R1 low-density residential for housing construction in the Westwood Country subdivision. The applicant has also applied for a vesting tentative parcel map to divide the .871 acre area, which is currently 2 parcel numbers, into 3 separate parcels, all facing Countrywood Lane. The lot sizes proposed for single-family residential housing are approximately Two of them are about 10,000 square feet, and then there's a third one that's a little bit larger at almost 18,000 square feet or 17,000 square feet. The project also requires approval of a general plan amendment to make our general plan consistent with our zoning regulations. Regarding the rezone and general plan amendment, the current parcel zoning classification is the community commercial, and the land is designated in the city's general plan as commercial. The community zoning district is intended to encourage the continuance of viable and predominantly pedestrian-oriented central business district for the city, and therefore the zone allows a wide variety of retail, service, entertainment, and administrative activities which are necessary to serve a larger trading area than the city itself. This is out of our general plan. The commercial land use designation in the city's general plan further recognizes an interplay between commercial uses and residential uses. For example, commercial land use policies 4 and 5 in our general plan encourage commercial development in residential areas that serve the needs of the area and impose development standards for the interface between commercial or office uses and residential uses through landscape setbacks and masonry walls. Since the applicant is requesting to have it rezoned R1 low-density residential, the city's general plan, which is Chapter 7 in land use, provides the following objectives as guidance in residential land use. A, to ensure adequate land area is available for future housing needs. B, provide new residential areas that offer a variety of housing densities, types, sizes, costs, and locations to meet projected demand throughout the community. C, identify locations of multifamily developments which are accessible to transportation routes, commercial areas, schools, and recreational facilities. And D, the goal is to enhance and maintain the quality of life in Escalon and to encourage a community identity and a pride in that identity. In accordance with the land use, in accordance with the policies and standards of residential land use, the general plan, Chapter 7 land use encourages that the city, 1, give priority consideration to infill development of vacant and underutilized land within the city limits through expedited permit processing. 2, in reviewing proposals for changes in land use to or from a residential land use, that a fiscal economic impact analysis shall be completed to ensure that the change is fiscally and economically beneficial to the city. The city shall also determine if the change will result in a residential land use inventory that is insufficient to meet the city's regional housing needs allocation. 3, develop design measures to buffer residential development from non-residential land uses. These measures at a minimum should include setbacks, roadways, community waterways, landscaping, and landforms such as berming, fences, and walls. 4, future growth of the city shall conform to the growth management ordinance of the city of Escalon. Residential building permits shall be limited as provided in the ordinance that's currently in effect. This area is an infill area. To the best of staff's knowledge, there's been no interest in developing it commercially by potential buyers. City staff has made assumptions that perhaps there's no interest in it because it's located behind other retail establishments and it lacks the ability to have a storefront along McHenry Avenue. The past interest in developing it as multifamily has been difficult, as we discussed earlier, due to the size and shape of the property, its location between both commercial and residential unit uses, and the property not being able to secure an emergency access easement, which is required for fire department access. Staff has also been advised, as we discussed before, that it doesn't pencil out financially, and then without the ability to construct multiple stories, which would require additional parking. So essentially, the area is adequate in size to provide multifamily project that would meet the city's current development standards. In terms of a fiscal and economic impact analysis, this project is relatively small, so we did not find that it would be warranted since it's only going to be the 3 parcels. The land has been vacant and undeveloped for many years. Developed commercially, it would generate development impact fees. Developed residentially, it would generate development impact fees, permit fees. Oh, sorry, I got that confused here. Commercially, it will generate development impact fees and permit fees, property tax, and possibly sales tax, depending on the type of business that locates there. But developed residentially, it will generate development impact fees and permit fees and increased property taxes from what it is currently. Due to the residential use backing up to commercial use, an 8-foot masonry wall is required and applied to the conditions of approval, along with the landscape buffer. There's already an existing masonry wall located between the existing residential and commercial lands, as well as an 8-foot masonry wall at the rear of the property towards P&L Concrete. The growth established with the rezone will conform to the city's growth management ordinance. The applicant has already applied for those allocations needed to fulfill the parcel map application, and it was approved by City Council effective for fiscal year 1920 or 2019-2020. Based upon the general plan policy objectives for commercial and residential development in the city, including the recognized interplay our plans have between commercial and residential uses, staff finds that the proposed rezone is consistent with the city's general plan and recommends that if the rezone were approved, to also approve a general plan amendment on the application. The Planning Commission did review the project and staff's finding at their June meeting, and also provided a recommendation that the City Council approve both the rezone and general plan amendment on this project. Regarding the vesting tentative map, as discussed prior, there's 3 different parcels, one being approximately 10,300 square feet adjacent to O'Reilly Auto Parts. The second parcel, 10,550 square feet, which is where the temporary sales office location is located. And parcel 3 is a flag lot that will majority be located behind parcel 2, 17,054 square feet. In accordance with the city's design standards regarding lots, the depths of the lots shall not exceed the lot width by more than 3 times unless specifically authorized by the Planning Commission. In staff's review of the parcel 3, which includes a corridor entrance approximately 150 feet in length, exceeds this regulation, therefore requiring approval from Planning Commission in order to move forward. That was approved. In accordance with flag lots for any proposed usage may be proposed or may be approved if any of either of the flag lot is required by topographic conditions, or there's no alternative design for the development of the interior portions of excessively deep parcels, and that will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare. City finds that this flag lot proposal acceptable and appropriate given the circumstances of the property, and that it will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare as it satisfies all other zoning requirements as specified. Regarding Title 17, our additional information on corridor flag lots requirements. The code requires that a corridor to a corridor flag lot shall not be more than 300 feet long nor less than 20 feet wide. The area of the corridor may not be applied towards satisfying the minimum lot area requirement. A corridor may not serve more than 1 lot, and lot frontage of a corridor lot is an exception to the lot frontage requirements in all zones. This flag lot proposed meets the city's current zoning requirements. Regarding our section on vesting tentative maps, the Planning Commission approved the map along with the proposed conditions of approval for this application, basing its recommendation on the conformity of the map together with its provisions for its design and improvements to the requirements of this title, the zoning ordinance, the general plan, and any other specific plans and any applicable ordinances, resolutions, or provisions of law. We do have regulations in the municipal code which are listed in the staff report, which require findings requiring disapproval. The Planning Commission did not, did conclude that none of those findings applied to the proposed subdivision and therefore could approve it. We also have an energy finding regarding the tentative map that it should not be recommended or approved by the Planning Commission unless it meets those requirements listed in the staff report, and the Planning Commission did review those as well and concluded that the subdivision met the energy findings and therefore could be approved. We do have a regional housing needs. Prior to recommendation or approval or conditional approval of any tentative map, the Planning Commission must find that it has considered the effect of the map on the housing needs of the region and that those needs have been balanced against the public service needs of the city's residents and available fiscal and environmental resources. They did conclude that the subdivision map met the regional housing needs. City Council action. With the time specified in the government code, unless such time has been waived or extended by mutual agreement between the subdivider and the city shall consider a tentative map at a public hearing and therefore approve, conditionally approve, or disapprove the application subject to those above requirements. I did list the fiscal impact, which is basically a reiteration of how it would be, what we would gain from it being developed commercially and what we would gain from it being developed residentially. We did send out a notice of public hearing to the residents within 300 feet, as well as published a public hearing in the Escalon Times on July 3rd. We received no responses from the surrounding community that received the notice and no calls regarding the project, either at Planning Commission level or at City Council level. The the Planning Commission did recommend approving the filing of the Class 32 categorical exemption for infill projects because it does meet the criteria listed in the staff report for this exemption. So the Planning Commission approved the recommendation to City Council that none of the above findings pose an issue with the proposed vesting tentative map, conditions of approval, rezone, general plan amendment, and that the project is consistent with all zoning and other applicable municipal code requirements, and that it is suitable for the particular property, adjacent units, uses, and public at large. We do have a section on there regarding time limits and extensions, which is basically a repeat out of the Subdivision Map Act. And once the ordinance receives its first reading or waiver of, the second reading would be conducted at the August 5th meeting, and the ordinance would take effect within 30 days, effective September 4th, 2019. So we have attached a number of documents. You've got your standard development application, the environmental information form, the project application letter, and a copy of the assessor's map, an aerial image of existing lots in vicinity, some site pictures, a copy of the vesting tentative parcel map with the recommended conditions of approval. I provided an 11 by 17 of that map in case the 8.5 by 11. For those of us that may need something larger, I do have the 24 by 36 if you'd like a copy. Those are the ones that Planning Commission reviews because they do the first detailed review on it. And then we do have the notice of exemption as well as a resolution approving that exemption and filing the general plan amendment. And then the ordinance, which is adopting the new zoning map or amended zoning map, which I provided an updated copy to, because the one that was in the staff report actually didn't print out the adjustment to it. So I did give you that one, and then it would approve the rezone. We do have Troy Wright in the audience with Windward Pacific Builders, if you have any questions. I know this is a detailed, long one. Because it's a rezone, general plan amendment, zoning map, we'd like to give all of the information that we can to make sure that it moves forward with all the information you need.
Would you like to take a sip of water after all of that?
I'm okay.
Okay. Are there any additional?
But I will.
Are there any initial questions before I open this up to the public hearing? Seeing none, let's open this up. Let's open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. While I was sitting in the audience, I looked at your logo there and noticed that you were incorporated March 12th, which is a very good day. I was born that day, a little later in time. But anyway, I'm here we're building the Westwood Country project there, and we were approached by the Spivaks to buy this portion of land that they've been trying to deal with forever, and we actually tried to help them, trying to do an apartment complex and a variation of things, and it involved an EVA, and we couldn't get it through Dollar General or P&L, and it would have to come through the subdivision that we're developing now. We would have to burn a lot. So anyway, bottom line is we kind of said, well, whatever, and Spivaks came back to us and said, would you like to buy it? So this is where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
So we would just incorporate this as part of our subdivision. So.
Any questions?
Okay.
That's it.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming. It's public hearing. If anybody else would like to speak on this issue, please come up now and do so. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council for action.
I move on staff's recommendation.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded to accept the findings and the conclusions and go forward with this. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Item number 12. And Dominique, it's you again.
Yes.
Hope you had a chance to
Yes.
wet your whistle.
This one should be relatively easy.
Okay.
So this item, which is approving a resolution establishing an underground utility district in a portion of the city of Escalon designating said district the First Street Underground Utility District and establishing the times in which poles and overhead wires shall be removed and underground service provided. On April 25th, 2019, the CPUC passed a resolution denying PG&E request to allow the city of Live Oak to borrow beyond the 5-year limit for their Rule 20A project. The resolution ordered PG&E to reallocate $554,000 of unused work credits from the communities that have not participated in Rule 20A program over the past 8 years to the city of Live Oak. The city of Escalon is subject to a partial reallocation unless the city establishes and forms an underground utility district within the 90-day period, which will expire July 25th. As of March 31st, Escalon has 661,000 credits, which of 22 or approximately 2,300 of them, which is a 0.34%, would be reallocated to that city. These numbers are subject to change depending on the final number of communities that are considered inactive on July 24th. The First Street Underground Utility District is proposed as First Street McHenry Avenue to Highway 120 in accordance with the First Street Improvements Project, or as other people are calling it, the Beautification Project. This action is in response to PG&E notifying cities that unused Rule 20A work credit amounts may be reallocated if to other cities if a UUD is not formed. At this time, the First Street Improvements Project is still in the phases of outreach, project scoping, and regathering of potential cost estimate and design updates, because we are receiving some funding from Measure K, which has some specific rules to follow in order to obtain that money. Those affected by the project will continue to receive notifications from the city as the project moves forward. PG&E has projected a design construction schedule process of approximately 5 to 7 years for the undergrounding of utility, and as you're aware, they have prioritized wildfires as their #1 priority, so it's pushing a lot of other potential projects behind. The city did notify all affected property owners by mail of this public hearing on June 28th, and we did not receive any comments, but we did have somebody come in today just asking the status. We did indicate in the public notice that it wasn't related to First Street project in the aspect that we're moving forward with that just yet. It's related specifically to making sure that those credits stay within the city and moving forward with that. So we do have the attached resolution that establishes exactly what PG&E was asking for and requiring for us to be able to keep those 2,300 units. And I have pushed out the date for September 30th, 2026, which is taking up the full 7 years, because I've been advised by other cities and our city engineer that they are, with projects that they've dealt with, are taking that full 7 years to get the undergrounding in. So if it needed to be adjusted, we can always come back and adjust it later. But at this point in time, we took up the full 7 years for the project. I did attach a copy of the map, which indicates that area. We have attached it to any of the affected areas for utilities along First Street from McHenry Avenue to Highway 120. And if you have any other questions, please let me know. We did confirm that this will not affect anybody at this point in time. It is strictly, it's not gonna hold us to any terms with PG&E. It's strictly to establish that underground utility for the purpose of saving those allocations.
All right, okay. Again, this is a public hearing. Are there any, before I turn it over to the public, are there any additional questions the council has?
Yes. Can you tell me exactly what a Rule 20 work credit is and what negative impact it would have if we lost them?
Well, right now, we haven't utilized them in the last 8 years, so they're there for us being able to use them on a qualifying project. So we looked into doing First Street, and although the cost for undergrounding utilities is at least twice the amount of what our credits are worth, they still take up a portion, and they are PG&E poles that are going down our area. So it's a credit that would be put towards the project for them to handle that undergrounding for us, which they require that they have to be the ones to do it anyway. So it would save us money in the long term, but we would still be paying for the undergrounding of the utilities. And at this point in time, even though it's only the 2,300 work credits, it's something we would have had to do in some point in time anyway, doing that underground utility district. So we figured to go ahead and do it, put it on the books, that way it's there, and not something later on that doesn't get done and we're stuck waiting longer. So we're just trying to be proactive and already having it established in case it's something that comes up along the path.
How does that affect the current property owners
At this point in time, it does not affect them.
at this point in time?
At this point in time.
What about later?
Yeah. How about down the road when you want to develop that?
So 90 days in advance, it has in the resolution that we would need to notify them the specific date that we would be doing that. And at that time, we would the council would need to decide what we would be doing in terms, at this point in time, according to the resolution, the amount, which is not to exceed $1,500, would be on the property owner if they have updates that they need to do, like a lot of those buildings are older. So they would need to prepare to make that additional expense to be included into the project. So this also kind of gives a heads up 7 years in advance at this point in time, in case we do move forward, that they could put some money away. It's limited to the 1,500 in this, and I don't believe any of them have anything that would exceed that. And the city can also look at that as we get closer and see if we're able to work something out with property owners as well. So it would be the upgrading. If their building or existing electrical infrastructure wouldn't be adequate enough, then they need to upgrade theirs, either panels or services.
Well, if you're gonna go underground from overhead, they're all gonna have to change their risers or off the underground.
Yeah.
things. That's gonna cost more than $1,500 a house.
And we're 7 years away, and so that is something that we're gonna be looking at in detail, because we already know that the amount of work credits we have at this point in time is only half as much as how much it's gonna cost. And so when we had our meetings regarding the First Street project, some of the comments that came up were, if we're not gonna underground the utilities, don't bother moving forward with the project. So we're at that aspect right now. It is the Measure K funding, so we have other items that we need to look into as well, because Measure K does want a lively mixture of sidewalk, landscaping, bike lanes, and parking, which at this point in time, it appeared at the meetings, for the community meetings with the property owners and businesses in that area, that parking is the #1 concern. And so if we did go that route with not parking, we're gonna have other things to deal with, like perhaps not being able to utilize that money for the project and finding an alternative way to pay for it, if that's the case. We haven't gotten there yet because we've been more focused on getting this done to move forward on First Street, and now we're gonna have 7 years to be able to do it, because that's when they're indicating that they'd be able to take care of it, so.
Assuming it'll get done, this is just to establish the district. I would-
So that we're in compliance and they won't take away those
Right,
work credits,
right.
yeah.
But it is completely optional. The city council
Yeah,
does
it is
not have to do this.
Okay.
If you don't do it.
Sounds like it's mandated from what I'm hearing.
No, it's
No.
not.
No,
It's, I wanted to make that clear, because all it is if you don't do it now, then they're gonna give those credits to another city. That,
How
there's
many
another,
of
is
them?
it, which city is it? Is it
Live Oak.
Live Oak?
So we have
has a
600,000
project that they need more money for, and so that's what happened. This notice went out to any city that hadn't, done this yet, and they said, if you're gonna use it, do it by July, whatever, or we're gonna transfer them to Live Oak.
When they say
But-
use it, do you have to actually have a project in process?
Well, you have to do this,
You have
this
to
process.
establish the
You have,
district.
yeah, you have to
This is
establish the
first step in
district.
qualifying, but do you now get those credits if you do this?
Yes, they won't be
Yeah.
reallocated to somebody else, so now.
But
they'll
if you,
hold them.
I don't know what happens if you end up not doing it, then you probably lose the
What's the
credits at
timeframe
that.
on that? Do you have a
Set.
certain timeframe?
5 to 7 years is
5 to
the
7
time
years,
frame
you have to
they
use those
gave
credits.
us.
And how many credits did we have?
600,000.
We have 661,000.
What does that mean in terms of dollars and cents?
Yeah.
It's a dollar for a dollar from what I've gathered, so $661,000.
But, and that would pay for about half of it?
Yeah. pay
Yeah,
for
so
about
you'd have
half
to
of
come
it.
up with the other half.
The other-
So if you don't want to do that, you don't,
Well-
you could just
well-
let the credits go.
Well, that's
to-
the issue. In 5 years from now, if we opt not to do it, or if we're not any closer, I mean, I don't think we're gonna put we should be putting any of the onus of this onto the landowners there, the property owners there. If 5 years from now, if we decide this is a no-go, what happens to that money then?
That's, you know, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine you would lose it at that point.
From
And
what I've understand, it just continues to accrue, and they do allow cities to take out an additional 5 years on top of whatever allocation
Yeah.
you have.
Oh, you can get an extension?
Do we lose the 2,200 or?
You
what
just
do-
lose that 2277. So
okay.
it's, PG&E is the one that's been mandated to do something about it, and then they're providing us the option if we want to save those 2,300 work credits, this is the way we do it.
So-
It's only 2,300 work credits, so it's $2,300. But we figured because this, at this point in time, is the direction we're thinking we're gonna be moving forward, why not just do it and have it done? That way we don't have to worry about it later, and it'll give us the $2,300.
Yeah, I just think knowing down the road, if we do end up doing this, it's gonna be on us versus them. The additional cost to get
Well,
this
it'll
done.
either be property owner or city, one way or another. It's not gonna be on PG&E.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Oh.
or if, and I'm not sure whether these monies could be used, across those lines. I'm not sure, we'd have to explore that. We haven't had enough time to look into that, whether we can
Sure.
use it towards
Okay.
private stuff. I'm assuming it would either be property owner or city.
This is a public hearing. Let me open up to the public at this point and start the public hearing.
I would like to make a point. Robert, I can hear you very well. Peter, I can hear you very well because you're close to the mic. Our city attorney, I can hear her very well. I missed a lot of what you were speaking because you're not close.
Like right here.
And, well, you're not projecting
Yeah,
back here.
okay.
You spoke about, I'm Pastor Wayne Warren from 1400 First Street.
Yes.
You talked about maybe some costs to us. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Okay, if you could speak a little louder, or please stay to the microphone. And I would like to hear what you said about houses or ones that would be connected and expenses, please.
So the utilities would need to be upgraded in areas that are not upgraded. So if we went through an undergrounded utility service connections in that area, each of the property owners, if they're unable to hold that, would have to upgrade their service. So they would need to pay for the upgraded service to be able to utilize that under the undergrounding of the utilities.
Well, it would be
So there,
mandated.
but it's gonna be a different price or cost for everybody, because we're not sure what everybody
If
has.
you're doing an underground utility, it is mandated at the
Mhm.
time that everybody goes to underground.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a fact.
Yes, and somebody has to pay for it.
That's the bottom line. And so, my other question would be, well, it's a public hearing, I'll get back to it, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Does anybody else like to speak on this?
Can I come back to
Go ahead. Yeah, sure, Wayne.
So what would be the estimated cost, you think, to the church and to a house to do that? What are we looking at?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, it's gonna be a case-by-case basis.
Thousands
Right,
and
yeah.
thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it just
I'm sorry,
depends.
Peter, I didn't hear you that time.
I'm not an expert, but I think it'll be thousands and thousands and thousands, and you can pick one, but it's gonna be a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, well then, if that is the case, then I would be opposed to it might overstretch, and as you've talked about the park out there, one of the things that Ed said is money, money, money. We have to have money to facilitate. And so I would be opposed if we're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars, because we have to have money to facilitate too. We run on a budget just like the city. You know, I would like to see us get some help, because I've been to the meetings for the improvement along First Street. I'm in favor of that. But, Peter, I'm not in favor of money, money, money. I think money is the issue that all of us have to deal with, and budgets have to deal with, to be able to facilitate whatever we're doing. And so if we're really talking about thousands and thousands of dollars, I would have to say to represent my church and the cost that it would be, because we would have 2 hookups, I would probably be opposed to this district. But I would like to say openly, so far I've been, and the workshops you've had, I'm pretty open to the redevelopment. We've talked about the cost of putting it underneath. I was just hoping that this was gonna add to that and give us some assistance in that, and that's why I'm here tonight.
So,
No problem.
so the work credits in general would provide assistance, because it would cover approximately half, unless the pricing continues to go up, of what the underground utilities would cost at this point. I believe they quoted, I think it was $1 per, I can't remember what it was offhand, but if we move forward with that project, like Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Alves was saying, a lot of the comment we were receiving at the community meetings was to not move forward with the project if we weren't going to be undergrounding. So at some point, whether we use the credits or not, so if we underground, it will come to the point of whether of businesses or the ones affecting that area that are affected would need to upgrade. And then at that point, the city would want
Right.
to determine whether or not they put that cost into the project or if it would be on the property owner. And that's something we wouldn't be able to tell, and we're not going to know how much it's going to cost until we get there.
Well, and that's,
Yeah.
that could be the impetus of what you heard, well, don't go forward if you're not gonna underground.
Mhm.
But at the time, if you don't know, that's gonna cost you thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and we don't.
Again, a lot of these projects sound fantastic on paper, until you realize, like you said, like Mayor Pro Tem, where's the money? When's the money gonna come? Well, it's not gonna come for forever, well, then you may not be able to do the project. It is still a public hearing, and who would like to speak next? Okay. Oh, Randy.
So at those meetings, the two things that were really important was to sustain parking and put the utilities for beautification. But it wasn't brought up to us about cost per, they were talking about a grant, to do the public, but not to do it. But there was no mention of, well, it's gonna cost all the property owners money down the, I'm trying to think of, who's there now that, but the church would definitely need assistance, for that. But, so I don't know if there'd be allowances for something like that too, or not. But, some of the property owners could probably do it, but some probably couldn't, so. But I can't see going forward with the project without putting the utilities underground. The beautification just wouldn't be beautiful without putting the utilities underground. So, I don't know.
Okay.
It sounds like, keeping the credits intact doesn't cost us anything to keep the credits intact. So it's like, why wouldn't we do it? I don't know.
That's the question. There's no cost until 5 to 7 years from now, once the undergrounding is gonna happen, so revoke it at that.
Right. Well, yes, we can, and from what I understand, and that's, Randy, to your point, you're right. I think that, all this basically does is create that underground district. I would be very surprised if 5 to 7 years from now, if we're ready to go on this, and if we don't have all the money for this, and therefore there's gonna be some requirement from the property owners there to come up with some of this money, I have a very good feeling it's gonna be a non-starter. And at that point, that'll be the end of it, What this does now, this just keeps a theoretical option open, from what I understand.
It's just
And-
going to prevent those 2,300 units from being taken.
Any additional input from the public? Okay, I'm good. Oh,
Gary Haskin, 471 Cabernet Court. I think Randy's right. It sounds like this is just a placeholder.
It is.
If we can do it, and they'll be there if and when we choose to use them. So if we don't do it now, we lose them, they're gone forever.
Right.
If you go ahead and inform the district, then when the time comes, then the decision can be made. Otherwise, if you don't do it now, that we've just given them away.
Right.
So.
Right. Thank you. Any additional input? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Sorry.
Okay, so would this connect with our development in there at the same time? Would it go hand in hand?
Dominique?
You mean the street project?
Yes, yes. because I know that that's one thing that we talked about, and whenever I left away from the meeting, nothing was, like Randy said, was spoken to about money from us, because we thought there was gonna be grants and stuff. But would this work hand in hand? Because I know one thing, we were excited about putting the utilities underground. Now, if this worked hand in hand, would the city be able to work with the connections to us and take in and be benefited from PG&E? Because we always like benefit of money to help with, as Ed said, when we need money somewhere if we can find it. And if this could go hand in hand, and the city would look at in the money they got, using us Connect Up, I'd be for this. I'm for the city being, I'd come excited thinking that we were getting something that we were looking for, and that's why I'm here tonight. And so that's something, you know, I don't know what the council would be able to say about now, because I know that we're talking about down the road, but I would sure like to at least have some satisfaction of what kind of protection we would be, or what the city would try to do to help us. Okay.
So in regards to the street project, the funding that we had was to cover the street project. It did not cover underground electricity, undergrounding the utilities. So we're only talking about PG&E. There's other utilities there that would have to be underground too, that we would have to take into consideration. When we had the meeting, staff didn't understand the expense involved when doing that undergrounding. So we couldn't relay to, or we didn't have the knowledge to relay to property owners of the potential expense. But we did come away with the understanding that that was an important part of the project, which is why we're here tonight trying to preserve those fundings. But there is no way that we can, at this time, you know, predict what will happen when we become, when we're ready to move forward with the project.
So, Tammy, let me say this to you, and I appreciate what we're all doing and what we're trying to look at. But if you come to that place where you don't have money to help us, or we're left with this, it could be very difficult for us. I can tell you right now, we're barely making our monthly commitments that's required to keep the church open. We are making them. We're not falling behind. You're getting your checks every month, and well, every other month, because you're every other month. But as a pastor, I'm watching it and thinking, as Peter said, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I'll tell you, it actually scares me tonight.
So again, let me tell you this, that this is our way of preserving these funds. It doesn't mean that we have to do this project. It doesn't lock us into expending those funds, or in 5 years saying we're just not going to be able to do this because of the burden on the property owners, or because of the funds not available for the city, whichever way it may be. So this action tonight is only to preserve those funds, to give us those options, whether it be in 5 years or 7 years, to make that decision.
I like that definition. I agree with that definition. And if we're trying to lock something, because I know we're all trying to get, as Ed said, we can't do with, unless we're getting money somewhere, we're trying to do it. But I also want to make all of you aware of my concern tonight, okay? Thank you for listening.
Public hearing still open. If anybody else would like to speak, going once, going twice, I will bring it back to the council for action. Questions in action.
Okay, in a perfect world, we all want the underground facilities. We all love beautiful towns. It goes back to the bottom line, where's the money coming from? The only issue I have with this thing is that if you create this district, there should be written in there somewhere that the owners of the properties have an option to vote whether or not that they'll encumber those costs. Because here's what you're doing, is you're creating this district, and if something does come down your way, you're in a district now. You don't get to vote on that anymore. It's over. You will get that cost. That's the thing I'm concerned about. So what I would say is, rather than doing the district is fine, with one little phrase in there that says, hey, and by the way, the community that's affected has a right to vote for it. Because otherwise, you don't get a vote. Once you create that district, it's over. That's the only thing I'm concerned about.
And of course, the city.
Well, I would do the motion that way. I'd go for it. I understand the importance of saving the money. I understand it completely. But I don't think it's reasonable to put the onus on these existing property owners in a very old part of town that they had no choice in what's going on there, to have to do those upgrades at their expenses. So let's save the credits, but let's put the little notice in there that, by the way, because we did create the district, it doesn't mandate that you have to pay those without a vote of the community or those affected. I think that would be my motion.
Okay, motion's been made.
I don't know if you can do that.
I'd second that motion.
Yeah, I mean.
Motion's been made and seconded to create the district with the caveat that at such time that we choose to,
Before the city council gives notification to do this, that the property owners will be given an opportunity to say whether they want to or not.
Correct.
yes.
Because nothing happens in this resolution until the city council decides to give notification that this is going forward.
And that's fine.
But once they do that, then those property owners are gonna bear that cost, and
That's
they have to
exactly
do
right.
it. They have to do it, or else their electricity can get cut
Well,
off.
what'll happen basically is you'll leave the
So,
property.
yeah, so, I mean, some agreement could be arranged where the city would be paying those costs, but the way that, but ultimately, the property owner is responsible.
Well, what my motion is meant to do is that if we have a situation where there is these improvements coming on, because we've created this district and now they're in it, they have that option to oppose paying those deals.
Right,
They
okay,
shouldn't be locked
yeah.
into something like that because it's misleading to them. We're trying to save the credits, which I'm all for, but at the same time, we've created a district now that has some ramifications down the line I don't think they should be subject to without some sort of input or feedback.
Right.
Yeah.
And they'll be noticed.
Yeah, Jamie, before.
Not noticed.
Yeah,
The intent of the motion and what I see is, at some point, if this is gonna move forward, that the affected property owners have a vote and have a say in it.
Yeah, I can add a section, to the resolution that
Just
says.
to be clear, it's not an individual, hey, we want out, and.
Right.
Majority
The
rules.
majority is gonna,
Yeah.
of the
Okay.
affected properties would
Right.
have that input.
what I'd like to be able to do before we actually proceed to vote on this is, I know Jamie's been writing something down.
And
Or
the
You've
one
been
that-
writing something down? Okay.
about what the motion is. He just
Yeah,
wants
I'd
to
like to have
clarify
the
what the
motion read,
motion
so
is.
it's nice, clear and succinct for everybody to be comfortable with.
Go ahead.
Okay?
Yeah.
You had
So,
some?
so the council would be adopting this resolution with an amendment to add a provision that before the city council takes the next step to implement the district, that the property owners would have.
No, that's not the motion. The motion is, we're gonna have the district, that's not the issue. We're gonna go ahead and pass it, we'll save our credits and you have your district. The difference is, when the city decides to move forward with a project on that new district, they must notify the owners and let them have a say whether or not they're willing to pay for that.
That's
What you just
Yeah,
said.
Yeah, that's what
Is
she
that
was
what you
saying.
said?
Yeah.
That's not the way I heard it.
Well, the only thing I would take out is amendment, because that's part of the main.
Okay,
motion.
so,
That's all.
okay, so we're gonna pass the resolution as is, but you're giving direction that before you go forward and notify.
So do you want the ordinance to state that the property owners have the right before we move forward with a project?
Yes, absolutely do.
So then that means we need to amend the ordinance.
That's what I was trying to
Oh,
say.
I see what you're saying.
As presented, we are amending it as presented, and,
With the
yeah.
amendment.
So we
with
have the
with
motion?
the
Is that done?
amendment, to
That's
give the
what I'd like.
property owners a
Are
vote.
you comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable that we're gonna notify them before and they have a right to block it if they don't, as a majority of them decide to.
And are you comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that because it allows property owners input as to what's
Absolutely.
gonna happen and what's gonna impact their property, and it's written into the resolution, so there's no.
Ambiguity.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay. Does-
Motion's been made and seconded. Do we have discussion on the motion?
Yeah, it sounds like we're haggling over 2,000 credits when we've got 660,000, and I think this is going to create more headaches. And the idea of creating a PG&E district, when PG&E is going through some crazy stuff right now, and And as far as what's going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years, we don't know. The state might have another beautification grant come down, and there might be other options. I see us as approving this, even though I like what we're saying as far as owner input. I'm not in favor of moving forward on this right now because it just seems like premature, and we're getting ourselves into this sort of a thing. Well, I don't know. I'm not in favor of this.
Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Nope.
Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion as explained and clarified by Ann Saprell, please answer by saying yes.
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 Aye. And all those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. Council communications, Councilmember Crumick.
Thank you, Mayor Swift. It's been a long meeting. Thanks, everybody, for staying. I do have a few things I want to talk about. So, Dominique, I guess, or Tammy, our conditional use permit used to be $1,700, right?
Yes,
Now it's
$750.
$1,750. What did it used to be?
It used to be $1,750 and now it's $750.
So we decreased it a bunch,
Seven-
right?
No, we decreased it $1,000.
Right, and that was awesome. And I'm wondering, why is it $750? Why is it so expensive? Well, what are the costs? Because that's what I'm saying is the cost to do what? I mean, everybody that's working to process paperwork and do all these things, what does that $750 go towards? Why can what I'm getting at is I want the conditional use permit in this town to be cheaper.
Okay, so conditional use permit is discretionary. It goes before the planning commission. So that cost would cover staff's time in reviewing property records on that property. We provide the background to the planning commission. We establish the the conditions for the use permit, mail it out, or email it out to all of the affected public agencies as well as the neighbors for a public hearing if required. We review whatever they submit, which would typically be like a site plan.
Sure, so it's a lot of reviewing and.
It's a lot of reviewing, applying the municipal code to it, deciphering
Right.
recommendations.
And the conditional use permit is something that almost anybody who wants to open a business in town has to get, it seems like.
No.
Depending upon
If you want to do a
types of
retail, some sort of,
No, it's.
well, commercial zoning, right?
No.
So it used to be a lot more, well, we've opened it up from, about 2 years ago, we had a lot of types of uses that were based commercially that were just, no, you can't have that in those areas. So we had brought something to both planning commission and council to require a conditional use permit on certain uses, which were mostly relatable to automotive, major, minor repairs, those type of things, to allow for them to apply for a conditional use permit. Most of the retail don't have to go through that type of permit because it's an allowed use. We do have a couple areas in town that have what we call non-conforming uses. They're zoned commercial and they're residential, or they're zoned residential, but they're acting as commercial. In those cases, when they're considered non-conforming, then they have to apply for a conditional use permit to expand or make any improvements.
Okay, gotcha. So I just, in general, am making a comment about the city fees in general, and I would like to see the fees go down as much as possible to where it's plausible. And the way I see the general budget of the city going is we've built up this reserve, which to me says we are taking in more money than we're spending. And I do not think that the goal of government shouldn't be to make as much money as possible. It should be to run as tight of a ship as it can. And so I would like to look at the different conditional use permit fee of $750. I think we could bring that down, and I'd like to look at that. The other thing is we had a big planning commission meeting here with a gentleman interested in some space on Main Street, and he mentioned that he looked into buying some land off of McHenry and developing it, and when he penciled out his loan, he couldn't afford it because of the fees kicked him over the limit. And that's just devastating to me. The city should not be trying to get some one-time hit on a business or developer. It should be thinking long-term about how it's going to benefit the town, and the way it should be getting its money is via property taxes and sales taxes, not developer fees. So I think we should look at those. I'm not in favor of those being so high. And I know I've heard things like, well, they're comparable. Well, I think we should be lower than everybody. That's what I think. A couple other things. Oh, how many trailers do we have out here now in the parking lot? It looks pretty full. Does anybody know?
We took our last trailer last week.
So how many lots have been filled up?
It's full.
How many?
It's not 21. There's 21 spots, but that's not how many are out there.
Okay, so it's
because
about
there's some of them that we can't use.
Oh, okay.
They
But it's about
weren't
15 or
feasible.
so?
I believe it might be 16.
You know?
Last time I counted, there were 10. I'll take that back at 11.
Well, maybe that are parked
Maybe
out there,
some
but
were-
all 16
So
spots
16
are
people are renting that space now at
Mhm.
about $70 a pop or whatever?
50.
So that's generating how much money a month for the city? $500-600, right? Something like that?
Well,
more?
it's probably closer to 800 now.
Well, okay, so what I'm getting at is, I know this was Mayor Pro Tem Alves' idea, and I just think it's awesome. I think it's amazing. I was, I've been I was against it for it and against it in different things, but it just seems like utilizing that space, $800 a month, $10,000 a year to the city just by making a smart move. I mean, it's just fantastic. So I would commend Mayor Pro Tem Alves for that idea and getting that going. The last thing is, two things. I think that the city, city staff is always bogged down with work and it's a full plate, and I hear all these things. I just wonder if the staff ever does sort of task efficiency or time-saving practices for staff, like things that'll mitigate tasks. I know for personal experience in working in the businesses that I do in town, making small changes sometimes save enormous amounts of time and energy. And I just wondered if there's ways to look at, like the way we collect checks from people or payments for water. If we don't accept credit cards, I think that's a little outdated. And I know you don't want to pay the fees, but I think there's ways to make the city as efficient as possible, but you always have to look at those tasks. You're doing things one way, it may not be the most efficient way. So I want to say that. I got two more things. Sorry, guys. Airbnb licenses, are we, what are we doing with that? I know we were going to charge people licenses to do that. Is that, anything happen with that?
We haven't done anything yet. We have moved forward with the ADU ordinance, and so it did come up that there is interest in us establishing an ordinance. We don't have any. We
Okay.
don't have any.
So nothing new, that's fine. I'm just.
Yeah, and so it's an ordinance amendment. It's most likely going to be located in our Title 17, which is zoning. So it would go to Planning Commission for review, and then it would come to council for approval.
To have to get a permit to do an Airbnb in town.
It hasn't. It would most likely have some type of regulation to it.
Or you
Whether
pay
or
a
not we
fee.
would require a permit at this time, that would be up to Planning Commission and City Council. That would be the time to bring up concerns regarding that. Whether or not that's something you want to do. You want a permit required? Do we want a fee
Right.
required? That would be recommended
Okay.
by Planning Commission for council approval.
All right. The last thing I got is about the 19 acres, and we had a long discussion about that. And a common thing is, where's the money? Where's the money? How are we going to get the money? You save up. I get that. We have saved. There's almost $400,000 now in the park fund. That money should not sit there. We need to use that. It's doing us no good sitting there, growing for 50 years. It still won't be enough for the big thing. We've got to put that to use. We have to build a skate park. They've been doing this thing for 20, 30 years, right? We've got to get that parking lot. We've got to utilize, I think, the jogging track if possible. And I don't want to give up on that. So the money's there. We have a big chunk of the money, and we should be smart with it. That's all I'm saying. I will.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Crumick. Councilmember Legero.
Very nice park feet once again. I commend everybody involved in the planning and pulling that off. It's always a great event, well attended, so thank you again for a great job. That's it. Perfect.
Thank you, Councilmember Legero. Councilmember Merkin.
I'll pass.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Alves.
Okay, just briefly, I want to thank all those who helped on the park feet. It's a committee effort, and Tammy participates and does a great job for us. Robert, Gracie, and there's a lot of people. I can't remember everybody off the top of my head, but Walt's wife does a tremendous job. She pretty much does the bulk of the work in that park area, and Robert as well. It's just a pleasure to have a group of people that dedicate themselves to this community unselfishly. One thing I mentioned to Robert, and I wanted to run it by some other people too, is maybe start a Park Feet Society. In other words, a group of those who are dedicated to keep this town's park feet and other activities long going by recruiting younger people and then orientating them to the concept, rather than just this old farts getting tired. Because it's gonna happen someday, just like the car show's not gonna happen this year, because you can only work a horse so long before they die, and that's what's going on here. So give it some thought out there and see if we can start inspiring some younger people to participate in organizing Park Feed and the other events in our town. Because we're gonna have to start generating our own support group here, otherwise it's gonna die too. Yeah, it's late, I'm done, that's good.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Alves. I'll make this short and sweet. Thank you very much again for everybody who participated in Park Feet. Police Department was fantastic. The Public Works was fantastic. Once again, congratulations to Marge Jackson for being our Grand Marshal this year. You want to talk about, yes, it is a group of volunteers, and it's a group of dedicated volunteers doing it, just like it's going to be a dedicated volunteers expanding the senior program, just like hopefully it'll be a dedicated group of volunteers to look into the trail issue. That's what makes this town run. Okay? Government doesn't do it all. Government shouldn't do it all. People who should be doing it are those out there giving their time and effort. I see some Legion members out here as well. That's what really makes this town work, is the volunteers and people who love this town and do this not for a paycheck, but out of the love of their heart for this town. So thank you all very much for coming tonight. We will be retiring into closed session now. If you want to hang around, that's great. I hope you brought a pillow, because it is late.
But a corporate sponsor we can snag would be excellent.